Kim's managed to avoid all that.
He's gonna mess it up.
For a little while here, we're recording directly to
They might be wasting their time, or it might not even be their responsibility. Furthermore, police officers said that there's an inefficiency in communication between the police and we're going to use
they're not waiting. Somewhat payment on the first one.
ladies and gentlemen, if we could find our seats and start the meeting. We're 2 minutes late. I apologize, but welcome everybody to the Toronto Police Service Board meeting for August the 23rd, 2018. Deputy Raymer, if we could find our seats, that would be great. Thank you. So welcome everybody. There's a number of things I wanted to do to start with. First of all, call the meeting to order. Second of all, I want to just talk for a second about the fact that in my meetings with some members of the Aboriginal community and particularly with Francis Sanderson, who has been a long-time member, in fact, for over 25 years, member of the Aboriginal Advisory Committee. So I want to meet regularly with that community to understand the challenges that we face in policing. But Francis pointed out that it would be great if we did start these meetings with an Aboriginal land acknowledgement. So we have agreed to do that. And Francis, along with PC Monica Rutledge of the Aboriginal Peacekeeping Unit, have kindly come here this morning, or this afternoon rather, to do a smudging ceremony to inaugurate this, and then we will read the acknowledgement, and we will do it at every meeting henceforward. So Francis, if you would come forward, and thank you very much for taking the lead on this, and welcome. Not that you're of 25 years commitment plus to this, not that you're a stranger by any stretch, but thank you for your leadership, as always. And Monica, welcome and thank you.
What's bothering us and what doesn't bother us, and to sort of educate you a little bit on our community, who we are, what we do, where we're from, what we need. And so when we were speaking, we talked about the land acknowledgement. I'm sure you've all heard of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the calls to action. There are 94 calls to action, and all levels of government have stepped up and are doing an acknowledgement before their meetings, before their openings, as they gather. And so when I spoke to Chair Pringle, we talked about it, and he says, do we have to do it all the time? And I says, well, it would mean something if you did. It's an important step forward in reconciling with our community. It hopefully makes you take a pause and think where you're sitting, where you're standing, where you've built your house, where your kids go to school, where you work, where you play. This was and has always been a meeting place. And many, many nations have called this home. Most recently, the Haudenosaunee, the Mohawk Nation, the Huron-Wendat, and more recently, the Mississaugas and New Credit, who are Ojibwe. And so it's honoring the people who cleared the way, who were here first, and whose land we're all walking on. And it's just paying homage to those grandmothers and grandfathers who were here many years ago and who are now on the other side, but they watch over us. So don't make them mad. So we start with a cleansing. It's a smudge.
Do you want us to stand, or?
You know, we say you can stand or you can sit, whatever you're comfortable with. And Monica is lighting the sage. We use sage as a way to purify. Sage brings us together. We bring it over our heads so we think in a good way. We bring it to our eyes so we see each other honestly. We bring it to our ears so we make sure we listen to what everyone is saying. We're not doing this. We're not daydreaming. We're not writing things down. We're listening to what people are saying. We bring it to our hearts so that we do things with a passion. We do things because we want to do them, not because we have to do them. And then we bring it over the rest of our body, so everywhere we walk today, every person we shake hands with, every person who comes to us with an issue, with a problem, with a fix, with a solution, we have that interaction, and it's respect. So that's brings our minds together. It makes us stop and think, makes us understand the reason why we're sitting around these tables, the reason why we're meeting together, to talk to each other and to make it better for all those that we look out for. And so we do it with a blessing. Jemnado Nokomis Mishamis, Creator, grandfathers, grandmothers, Miigwech, thank you for this day and all the gifts you've given us, our lives, our families, our friends, our jobs, and our communities. We ask the grandmothers and grandfathers on the other side to watch over us, guide us, and help us make the best decisions, make the right decisions. Help us to ask for help if we need it, and help us to take that help when it's given. We ask that we become better people the more we sit and talk to each other. We ask that we share our ideas, share our thoughts in a good way, with kindness, caring, understanding, but most of all with respect. And so I say miigwech to the Toronto Police Services Board for having the wisdom and the foresight to pick up the mantle and run with it. Help us to educate all the people that you have under your umbrella. We're here. Monica particularly is here, right in the building. If there's ever a need for help, ever a need for an answer, if you have a question, there are no stupid questions. And you can ask us. You certainly can call me anytime you need to. We've got resources at hand. And so I say miigwech to the Toronto Police Service and the Toronto Police Services Board for opening their hearts and their arms to us and welcoming us at their meeting. Miigwech, thank you.
And thank you, Francis, for your hospitality and your advice. And Monica, thank you for all of you, and thank you for being here today. So we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now the home of many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So we will read that at the beginning of every meeting from now on. And again, Francis, thank you so much. Thank you. Colleagues, since our last meeting, we had the tragedy on the Danforth, and I would just like to make a few comments. The events that unfolded on the Danforth on July the 22nd, 2018, wounded our city greatly. And it is at times of tragedy like this that professionals of the Toronto Police Service step up and run to danger to help those in need. The Toronto Police Services Board commends the service members who were involved in the response to the Danforth shooting and who continue to be engaged in the investigation of this tragedy. We all watched as members responded with courage, professionalism, and humanity to the events of that evening. Along with the whole city, this board mourns Juliana Kozis and Reese Fallon, whose lives were tragically lost that night. We also acknowledge that many others continue to recover from physical and emotional injuries that need attention. The board also recognizes the work of members, the work the members perform can be difficult, and being involved in a response to a critical incident can have deep and lasting impact. and we wish to remind members of the support and resources that are available through the service for them, and encourage colleagues to look out for one another in the aftermath of tragedies like this. From those members who take the first emergency call, to those who mobilize to find the threat and respond to it, to those who are involved in conducting the investigation and working with victims in the aftermath, these are all incredibly tough and challenging jobs. The board is deeply indebted to our members for performing them so exceptionally well. We know from Chief Saunders and the command, this organization is comprised of exceptional professionals, many of whom quietly do their job without regular praise or recognition. So the board wants to take this opportunity to recognize those quiet heroes and to thank them all on behalf of the Toronto residents. So thank you, Chief, and if you could pass that on, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Board, for those comments. And you know, I too want to commend the organization, the men and women, sworn and civilian, that were involved. I can tell you, most of command was there on scene and got to see firsthand the tremendous work that was done, not just by Toronto Police, but also the first responders and the alignment that we have. Unfortunately, we're getting better at these types of circumstances. I do want to note that victim services played quite a critical role as well within this whole event, and they continue to work, and they've had quite a bit of pressure considering the amount of incidents that have occurred in the recent future. But I do, again, echo the great effort, the great works that were done by the front line specifically on that day. And I know that because of their actions, I do believe that the loss of life would have been significantly more had the officers not been there, responded, and dealt with the situation appropriately. So we're very sad at the loss of those who lost their lives and those that are injured, and those not just physically but also emotionally. But the city is a great city, and our strength really is in our citizens and the agencies that have stepped up to work with us as well.
Thank you, Chief. Colleagues, I'll open the meeting further by asking if there are any declarations of interest into the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Okay, thank you. Then I'd ask for confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held July the 19th, 2018. Councillor Nunziata, seconded Councillor Hart. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. I think just before going through the agenda, I'm just going to move right to the presentation by the Honourable Gloria Epstein on the independent civilian review for missing persons and the review of the terms of reference. So great. Justice Epstein, thank you. And Mark Sanson, thank you for being here, both of you, Mark and Gloria. Is that mic on?
Sorry?
Is that mic on for you there?
Soon find out.
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you, Justice Epstein.
Chair Pringle and members of the board, I am honored to have been selected by the board to serve as the independent reviewer for the civilian review into missing persons investigations in Toronto. In my opinion, the work of the review is of critical importance to our diverse communities within Toronto, and specifically to how missing person investigations are done and should be done, particularly as affecting marginalized or vulnerable communities. This independent review was prompted by the tragic deaths of members of our community, and more specifically, by deep concerns expressed about how the Toronto Police Service conducted the investigations into their disappearances. Questions have been raised about whether the handling of such missing person investigations have been tainted by systemic bias or discrimination, and whether current policies and procedures adequately protect against implicit or explicit bias or discrimination against members of the LGBTQ2S+ community and marginalized or vulnerable groups more generally. This independent review was also prompted by questions raised about how and when the Toronto Police Service advises or cautions the public and members of specific communities about safety concerns arising from missing person investigations and whether the current approach adequately protects the public. It is important that these and related questions and concerns are addressed in an independent, transparent, and thorough way. To that end, this board established a working group to make recommendations to it, and I wish to express my appreciation to the working group and its facilitator, Brees Davies, for their hard work and their skill in developing the model for an independent systemic review and terms of reference that captured the important issues to be examined. To the members of the public, particularly those most directly impacted by the events that prompted this review, I commend the terms of reference to you. In my correspondence to Chair Pringle, dated August 8, 2018, which is available to the public online, I proposed some modest changes to the terms of reference and explain why I propose those changes. My counsel, Mr. Sandler, or I would be pleased to answer any questions you might have about the proposed changes. They are designed to ensure that I have the necessary independence and discretion to do my work while capturing the intent and objectives of the working group and of this board. These suggested changes also confirm my desire to hear the widest range of views from stakeholders, whether they are community members or members of the service. I am mandated not to prejudice ongoing criminal proceedings, and I intend to respect that limitation. In my personal view, the importance of the issues identified in the terms of reference support the commencement of my work now, rather than awaiting completion of any related criminal proceedings. Of course, if any areas remain unexplored as a result of this limitation, I will identify them together with recommendations in my report. At this point, I intend to limit what I say about my approach to the review, and I say this for two reasons. First, I will not formally commence my role as an independent reviewer until September 1, 2018, when I officially retire from the Court of Appeal for Ontario. Second, I intend to engage in a broad consultative process that will engage members of the community to speak with me either in a public forum or at their request confidentially. I wish to embark on that consultative process early in my work. I expect that those consultations will assist me in shaping my overall approach to this review. That is why it is premature for me to say too much at this time. People have been the focus of my career path. During my 7 years as a waitress, my 2 years operating a fishing camp on an island in Northern Ontario, my 15 years as a lawyer, and my 25 years as a judge, people from many walks of life have taught me a great deal. I can make no stronger statement of my commitment to this review than by indicating that I chose to retire from the Court of Appeal to enable me to devote my time and my energy to this critical work. I look forward to the listening and to the learning process ahead that will form the foundation of my review. I will be assisted by Mark Sandler, my very able counsel. He is experienced as counsel to a series of public inquiries and systemic reviews and is extraordinarily well positioned to provide the needed expertise. His work as an appellate and trial criminal litigator for 38 years, as a human rights advocate and former part-time member of the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario will stand us in good stead. I also intend to engage an advisor as well as an advisory group to further ensure that diverse voices within the community are heard and contribute to my final report. We have already started the process of collecting relevant documents for examination, and we intend to hit the ground running when I officially commence my duties at the beginning of September. A website will be created shortly that the public can access, and the website will update the public on the progress of the review. I expect that my final report will be issued on or before April 2020. The time period, Mr. Chairman, reflects the large task that awaits me. The board has indicated that it recognizes the need to repair its relationship with the LGBTQ2S+ communities in the City of Toronto and foster ongoing positive relations with members and organizations within those communities. Such a relationship must be built on transparency, accountability, and trust. I'm hopeful that my recommendations will ultimately promote efficient, effective, bias-free policing in relation to the missing persons investigations, and more generally, in relation to communities that feel marginalized and vulnerable. Thank you again for the opportunity to serve the public in this manner.
Thank you, Justice Epstein, and thank you, Mr. Sandler, and Justice Epstein, particularly thank you for taking on this. Your outstanding 25 years experience on the bench, 25 years plus, is great for us to have someone like you take this really important assignment on. You've just outlined why it is so important, but it is, and we very much appreciate it. So thanks to both of you, first and foremost, and now I'd ask my colleagues if they have any questions they wish to ask. Colleagues? If not, thank you both very much, and we look forward to assisting you in any way we can, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There are three, thank you very much, that's great. There are three deputations, and I will remind people that they are limited to 5 minutes each. The first doesn't need that reminder, Derek Moran.
Just want to thank Chris for Langenfeld for bringing these mics back. I like these mics better. So I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, and doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. Last month, Chair Pringle, I told you when you browbeated us with the board's bylaws that I'd bring a court case, ironically from the Court of Appeal. I don't know if Justice Epstein was a part of it. This is Bracken versus Fort Erie, 2017, Court of Appeal of Ontario. Democracy depends upon the free and open debate of public issues and the freedom to criticize the rich, the powerful, and those who exercise power and authority in our society. Debate on matters of public interest will often be heated, and criticism will often carry a sting, and yet open discussion is the lifeblood of our democracy. Now, one thing most people probably won't know about Justice Epstein is that her boss, well, Premier Ford says the boss is us, the people, but her other boss is Chief Justice George Strathy. And I just want to point out, he wrote a paper called the In Personam Admiralty Jurisdiction paper. And just briefly, I want to point out that Canadian maritime law, he said, is not the law of any province of Canada. So I just want to refresh Justice Epstein's memory that in Pro Swing versus Elta Golf 2006, the Supreme Court of Canada said, judges do not apply strict rules, but follow general guidelines illustrated by such maxims as, and they go on a bunch of maxims. Take notice of one maxim of law, that is, in law, every definition is dangerous. And there's another one that says every definition in the civil law is dangerous, for there is very little that cannot be overthrown. So in this report it says, and whereas a number of people, and in particular members of the LGBTQ2S+ communities in the City of Toronto, have gone or been reported missing and have later been identified as victims of serious violence. Now, in the Supreme Court of Canada, in the reference regarding the secession of Quebec, 1998, They said, with little formal elaboration of the definition of peoples, the result has been that the precise meaning of the term people remains somewhat uncertain. Because I'm not quite sure if you guys just referenced there regarding to people, why this is called the missing persons report. Anyone know what the courts have said about what the definition of person is? This is R versus Sullivan, Supreme Court of Canada, 1991. The introduction of the criminal negligence provisions in 1954 was not intended to change the meaning of person. And that term, as used in section 203 of the code, the criminal code they're talking about, is synonymous with the term human being. Okay, so good so far. This is Palmer Lowe versus Canada Revenue Agency, 2017, Court of Queen's Bench, Alberta. In Canada, a human being is also a legal person, a person before the law. You cannot reject that or opt out of it. To do so is simply nonsense. They are one and the same. They have exactly the same rights. They have exactly the same obligations under Canadian law. Here's another case from the Court of Appeal for Ontario. This is from 1979. Ree Cummings and Ontario Minor Hockey Association. What is a corporation? According to our system of law, a corporation is a group or series of persons which by a legal fiction is regarded and treated as a person itself. A legal person is anything to which the law gives a legal or fictitious existence and personality with capacity for rights and duties. The only legal person known to our law is the corporation, the body corporate. So on this basis, these aren't my words, by the way. This is what the courts have said about what person means. This really should be called the Missing Corporations Working Group. Except, I don't know, I saw Brian DeMatos here recently. I know he takes this issue very seriously. I don't think the community would say that we ever had a missing corporations problem. These are about people, not persons. Do you ever sit there and think about just how much pain and suffering these men must have went through before they met their end? I find it is very disrespectful. Where I had my statement here. I do not consent to the name of this being the Missing Persons Working Group Review. It is an insult to the memory of these, your fellow man, to attach such a term of art with a legal context to it that doesn't even apply to these people. And take notice, the supremacy of God is recognized in the first line of the Constitution. Romans 2:11 says, "For there is no respect of persons with God."
Thank you, Derek. Colleagues, any questions for Derek? Thanks, Derek. Next is Brenda Ross. Sorry, Brenda, 5 minutes, as you know, and I'll give you the 1 minute warning.
Item number 5 is the question, and I thank Justice Epstein for taking on this horrendous task. I don't know how he could do better than to get someone of her stature to take on this calamity. So I am grateful, but I do want to make a few points, and I hope she will listen. She seems to be somebody who does listen. Regarding the terms of reference into the missing persons investigation, I would like to take issue. Page 8, bias-free policing. In my opinion, the success of the inquiry will depend in part on the will of the chief, the Police Services Board, and the police themselves to provide bias-free policing. In my 36 years of interactions with the police in my community where I live, I have seen no evidence on the part of the police in that part of the city that one of their goals is to provide bias-free policing. A policing that is free of discrimination. Some people don't know what bias is. They don't know what that word means. So the proper word for everyone to understand would be policing that is free of discrimination. This board also doesn't understand that term. So hopefully by the time I'm finished speaking today, it'll be clearer. You have invited Mrs. Sanderson to come today, and everybody was nodding their head in agreement that we should acknowledge the Native people. Well, that would be the first time we've acknowledged them, and as long as I can remember. We did mention them on Aboriginal Day. So now we're talking about another group of people who, as Derek Moran said, the suffering that they must have gone through before they died. I don't even want to put my mind to it. Not to mention the young lady that was found in the stairwell. The opposite of discrimination-free policing, bias-free policing, is what I believe we have, and what I believe our problem is, and what caused some of these deaths. Let's make no mistake, some of these deaths were completely preventable if anyone had paid the slightest bit of attention to what was being said. On March the 22nd, 2018, I provided a verbal list of the groups of people that are targeted by the police for no service, and much worse. One of those groups, and this is a broad term I'm going to use, being the gay community, not meaning to leave anyone out, because as I said, I named off a series of groups of people that also are ignored by the police. I feel badly that everyone is not treated equally, and that the chief, the police services board, the white shirts, the VIPs of the police department, while paying lip service to we don't want any bias and we don't want discrimination, and we're going to stand up and defend everyone, that everyone is equal rights. This is not happening. This is just conversation that has gone on month after month. But this is not happening. None of this is happening. It's just talk. Talk, and we write it in the agenda. But none of this is coming true. It's a fairy tale. And now Justice Epstein is going to have to figure out what she's going to do about it so that her report and her suggestions will succeed. God help her. So, how is it we have a section in this that says the reviewer is going to recommend accountability, including remedial and/or disciplinary measures, if members of the service engage in biased or discriminatory conduct when receiving, investigating missing person reports? Okay, who's going to be in charge of receiving the complaints, and how are they going to be acted upon? I feel that bias is a weapon and bias kills. People are dead because of the discriminatory police practices involving lack of attention to violence and warnings from members of the public. The chief does not show leadership in this matter, and neither does anyone else, including the mayor. After a slew of needless deaths, the gravity of the situation must not be forgotten. The issue of non-compliance is very serious and has to be dealt with. How is it going to be dealt with? This effort to cover up these serious matters in calling an inquiry doesn't change what has happened. We must make sure that this doesn't happen again. May the dead rest in peace, knowing that there are people who have cared what has happened to them, but the chief and the board have to do their duty to punish discriminatory behavior. Liability cannot be used as a reason for neglect of duty. Do your duty or resign. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you so much.
The final, I would draw people's attention to the fact there's a written submission as well from Joe Clark, but Brian DeMattis is the third verbal. Brian, you know the rules as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for accommodating me. I'm sorry I didn't meet the deadline, but thank you for accommodating me. Can you hear me? Okay, here. I have a few points to make. I'm glad this is going through, and I just want to point out a few things with recommending with the budget that how the budget of this project is spent is very transparent, and that consultations are made, and I'm really glad that's happening, but it's how we're making consultations is very important.
Brian, could you move the mic a little closer? Sorry.
Can I stand? Okay. Sorry. So budget transparency, the consultation also needs to be how the consultation is being made. So the advisory group should be made before the consultation group. So questions on how we ask, what we ask is performed so we can get the best results. I also want to I also want to mention that I'm shocked to see this written submission from not from Joe Clark. He's a known things, but the written submission from Joe Clark, I'm not sure if folks reviewed it. This is hate speech. This is like transphobic, it's racist, and Joe Clark is known to be transphobic and racist, and I'm shocked that this was even printed in here, and I think that should be reviewed. And that's about it right now, and I'm just, I'm really happy that this board is going forward with this.
Brian, thank you. If you understand, we have to take all submissions that are put in, but thank you for yours.
Is there a process, just a quick question, is there a process like?
But thank you for yours. If you've got concerns, you can consult Carlene, our secretary, about it. Are there any questions, colleagues?
Just if you can clarify, you mentioned budget.
Mm-hmm.
That you want to ensure the budget
is very transparent.
So can you just elaborate a bit on that one?
Sure. When transparency, when making that website and connecting with things, it should be really transparent on where the money's going, who it's going to, and like things like for consultation resources. And it is a very common practice that marginalized folks, trans folks, racialized folks are always set up to be in the advisory group, but always meant to volunteer their time and their space, and they should be also compensated financially, and not just one leading it, but those who are also involved. So I'm recommending stipends for the advisory group, whoever gets involved, is mainly, and it's very important on how these resources are spent, with the focus that we are focused on the most vulnerable and marginalized folks, that they also get paid for their experiences and work here.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Colleagues, any further discussion? If not, it just remains for me to again thank Justice Epstein and Mr. Sandler for doing this, and for the outstanding work that they have already done but have taken on. So again, I see them still here, so I want to thank both of you so very much for it. You can hear how important it is, and thank you again. All right, colleagues, do we need a motion to receive? Okay. So a motion to receive the presentations and deputations, and a motion to approve the report. Ms. Chandra-Casera, seconded. Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. We have another presentation on the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel. The membership recommendations from the Interim Steering Committee, and I believe Natisha Massaquoi is here. Oh, Natisha, thank you. And again, thank you to you and your co-chairs for all the work you've done. I know it's been quite a while, and I think it's a great report, but thank you very much for all you've done. And welcome again.
I'm here to present the recommendations of the Interim Steering Committee, and we'll be focusing on the membership of the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel. The Interim Steering Committee was comprised of myself, Board Member Upala Chandrasekera, and Ms. Asifa Arang, who is the Executive Director of Across Boundaries. We believe that we've undertaken a very transparent and thorough process, and we'll be presenting the slate of candidates to serve on the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel for the board's consideration. Just to give you a brief synopsis of the process, a call for applications was released between the months of April and May, and we were very impressed with the caliber and the volume of applicants that we received. Of the applications that were screened based on the criteria that I presented at the last board meeting, the Interim Steering Committee reviewed 24 of those applications, and we chose 10 to proceed for face-to-face interviews. We were impressed with the caliber of candidates, as I stated, who applied, their breadth of knowledge and their expertise, in particular in the areas of anti-racism, anti-Black racism in particular, mental health and addictions. And we were also very impressed with the number and the majority of those applicants who had direct lived experience, particularly with mental health and addictions. We selected from those 10 applicants that we interviewed in person for the final community members who would serve on the ARAP. During this period, we also corresponded with Chief Saunders, who named the police service representatives to serve on the ARAP. And lastly, in addition to my original presentation of the membership, we have, through an ongoing dialogue with the members of the Andrew Loku Coalition, as well as the members of the board's mental health subcommittee, have decided to invite Ms. Jennifer Chambers and Mr. Steve Lurie to also participate on the ARAP. We believe that their participation and expertise will be invaluable, as well as Chair Pringle, who is the co-chair of the board's mental health subcommittee. So all three will be participating in our work with the ARAP. So we are also adding Staff Sergeant Stacy Clark, who's leading the Learning, Development, and Standards section at the Toronto Police College, and we believe her expertise as well with Black community liaison work will be invaluable to our work, as well as PC Monica Rutledge, who leads the Aboriginal Peacekeeping Unit. So these, we believe, these 5 additional members, we believe, are crucial to ensuring that the work happens. So the detailed biographies are included in your package, so I won't go through those, but just to go through the list that we're presenting, myself and Upala Chandra-Sakura will be co-chairing the committee. Ms. Asifa Sarang has decided to step down after her work with the interim steering committee and will not be proceeding further. Inspector Chris Boddy, Ms. Jennifer Chambers, as I've already stated, Staff Sergeant Stacy Clark, Ms. Larissa Crawford, Ms. Shalini Konanur, Mr. Andrew Lee, Mr. Steve Lurie, Deputy Chief Barbara McLean, Dr. Akwasi Awosu Bempa, Mr. Andy Pringle, Chair Pringle, Ms. Letitia Reddick, PC Monica Rutledge, as I've already stated, Superintendent Ruben Strobel, Mr. Musa Tahilil, Detective Sergeant Ali Vergi, Dr. Charmaine Williams, and Deputy Chief Peter Ewan are all being presented as the slate. I do also want to note that Dr. Charmaine Williams and Dr. Akwasi Owusu Bempo will be our subject matter experts based on their expertise and research in anti-Black racism, as well as policing and mental health and addictions. We anticipate, or we have confirmed, that our first meeting will be October 5th with the approval of this slate. And as I stated in my first presentation to the board when I began this process, we understand, or I personally understand, the enormity of the task at hand. A man, Andrew Loku in particular, was killed in a manner that was not in keeping with policing excellence. And we believe that this process and the work that we are undertaking is going to engage in a very collaborative manner what I think are some of the best minds in the community, as well as the Toronto Police Services. And we will be developing and working with the board to ensure that you have the tools to make the necessary changes. So I want to thank Chair Pringle for his guidance and leadership throughout this process, as well as Chief Saunders for his ongoing commitment. I present the slate to you as stated.
Thank you, Natisha, and I know all the work that the three of you have done, and the outreach that you did, and the excellent candidates you had. So thank you very much for this important work. Before we go any further, colleagues, any questions of Ms. Massaquoi? If not, again, I think that actually says, Ken, did you have one?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Yes. Can you give us a sense as to when you interview these candidates, what are some of the primary reasons that they offer to you for wanting to be part of this?
For some, it was lived experience in terms of the issues at hand. I think all expressed an extreme commitment to wanting to work with the Toronto Police Services, which was a key component of the questions that we asked. They wanted to work to make improvements, as well as from different perspectives in terms of the understanding the nature of the work of the board and the type of support that would be required in terms of ensuring that the community was well represented when the board was making its decisions. So it was a variety of reasons, but I think it came down to a commitment to improving relationships with community and Toronto Police Services and ensuring that Toronto Police Services was engaging in a level of excellence that we know that it can.
Thank you, Natisha. We have two deputations. The first is Miguel Avila Velarde.
Thank you, Mr. Pringle.
Miguel.
Thank you, Francis Anderson, for coming and opening the ceremony with smashing. That was very touching. As you probably are aware, it took 2 years to have this acknowledgement of the land. It was not an easy task. You know that, Mr. Pringle. It was not a work of the Miss Monica Rulage, who should be the one pushing forward to have this land acknowledgement at this board. Thank you, Monica, for your lack of cooperation for the community. I don't know why you're doing in this committee, by the way. So, Uncle Doc Ford announced that the cancellation of the Bill 175 reforms to the SIU. The death of Andrew Loku should be preventable if we have training. Doc Ford keeps saying in the media, we need to give resources and tools to our officers. I don't know what does he mean by tools and resources. In my book, tools and resources mean give them then the tools which will keep them accountable of the crimes. In that regards, I'm talking about the cameras, the body-worn cameras project that currently is under review and the experimentation, and there's certain levels of study. So Doc Ford has handed $25 million to this police board, not to Mr. Pringle and not to the mayor, but he has written a personal check to Mr. Sanders. I wonder if Mr. Sanders has cashed in this check yet, because I don't want to see that more murders by police in the community, and we have to keep them accountable. And the only way to keep them accountable is by having the video recording of the interaction with the police officers. Last February, this board approved 400 tasers to be provided to frontline officers. But Judge Yakaboshi said that to implement the stun guns, it has to be also with, in addition, cameras to make it to be able to have the police accountable at all times. Those cameras are not available because money, funding. So now you have $25 million. What are you going to do with the $25 million? Hire more officers, but what about accountability? Where are we leaving the accountability portion? We're hiring 200 police officers more to patrol the city. Why we are not equipping them with cameras, body-worn cameras that can protect me and can protect them from false accusations? And you know what? It can decrease the number of claim liabilities that Toronto taxpayers had to pay for it. It's not the police services board who pays for those claims. It's the city of Toronto. It's not the police union who pays for those claims or liability. It's us, the city of Toronto taxpayers who pay for those claims. We need to put a stop to this. I know it's not in the agenda, Councilor Nunziata, but you know, you are in favor of more police officers, but you know what? We need to have them accountable of the crimes. We need to have those cameras on their uniform as part of the tools that Mr. Dogford keeps claiming. We need tools and resources, yes. Well, we need those cameras. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miguel. Any questions for Miguel? Thank you. The next is Ruben Charles. Is Ruben Charles here? Okay, thank you. Then if there are no more deputations, any further questions or discussion, colleagues? Upla, do you want to? And thank you also for all the work that you've done and the hours you've put in.
Thank you. And I really also want to thank Notisha Masco. I think this process was actually a really positive process. A lot of really great interest from the community to be part of this panel. And personally, I think there were a lot of young people who were very interested in being part of this panel. Notisha and I were both very impressed by that. So I think we've assembled a really great group, and we're very excited to get the work going. So thank you, Notisha.
Yes, certainly, Francis.
So how often will the committee be meeting? Have you set dates and timelines?
We're hoping to have the first meeting in the first week of October, I think October 5th, and hoping to meet every other month till the end of next year. So, and this is prior to your tenure on this board. The interim committee had put together some recommendations about what an initial mandate can look like. And in that, we're thinking the initial mandate will be till the end of 2019, at which point the panel and the board can decide how we move forward after that.
Move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. So, colleagues, if there are no other questions, a motion to receive the deputations and to approve the report. Natisha Santacazera, seconder. Francis Nunziata, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and let me just echo my colleagues, Natisha, to you. Thank you. You have journeyed here a number of times to talk to us, and you've guided this with Natisha and Sifa very well, so we really appreciate it, and thank you very much, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you. So that's approved, colleagues. Now that we have respected the time of our guests, let me go through the agenda items, if I may. The next item is item number 7, which we hold for a deputation. There's deputation, right? We did a confirmation of minutes, yeah. The item number 8 is also, is that a presentation? Yeah, okay. So we'll hold that. Item number 9 is the same thing. It's an update from Chief Saunders. Item number 10 is the review of complaint investigation pertaining to policy of Toronto Police Service Professional Standards case 068636. Motion to approve. Is there a motion to it? Okay. 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 There is a motion then. So you can see it on the board. That's flashed bigger. The board concurs with the decision of the chief and the actions taken by the chief in response to the complaint, and the complaint to the independent police review director and the chief be advised in writing of the disposition of the complaint with reasons. May I have a motion to accept that? Councillor Hart, seconded. Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Item number 10 we hold for deputation. Item number 11 we hold for deputation. Item number 12, Mayor Tory, any conflict of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Thank you. And welcome. Item number 12 is the special constable appointments for the U of T. Motion to approve. Councillor Hart, Ms. Sandra Casera, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 13 is new job description for the business partnership, human resources business partner, and human resources advisor. Motion to approve. Councillor Hart, Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 14 is a new job description, senior talent management consultant, people and strategy performance. Motion to approve. Councillor Hart, Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Any contrary? I'd remind people that we've seen all this, the update and the strategy to this a number of months ago when we passed that. Deputy McLean brought it forward for us. There is a deputation on 15, which is the parking tickets, so we'll hold that. Item number 16 is the extension for vendor record contract, DNR Electronics Mobile Workstation Mounting Hardware. A motion to approve. Councillor Hart, Mr. Jeffers, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item number 17 is the 2019 patrol vehicle purchase. Motion, Mayor Tory? Yep. No, we'll hold it. Thank you. Item number 18 is the composition of the working group of the independent, this is the expense to the legal costs. Motion to Mayor Tory, seconded by Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? Any contrary?
May I just make a comment?
Yes.
Just to say that, this is a small matter of the bill, but I communicated myself, and I'm sure, I don't know whether you've done it previously, but she, meaning Ms. Davies, did just an excellent job for us, and I just thanked her for the public service involved, even though she, got paid some amount for her services. She just went way above and beyond, and I just thought it was really helpful to get us off to a good start on the exercise.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, I saw the work in the office here because, she was very sensitive to all the community inputs, etc. And I think you missed it because of your necessity bail on the Danforth, but Justice Epstein just paid tribute to her as well. So it was exceptional work, I think, in every way. So again, the Mayor Tory, you're approving this and seconded by Ms. Sandra Casera. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. And 18.1 is for receipt. So motion to receive, that's the, with respect to the working group again. A motion to receive, Councillor Hart, Mayor Tory, all in favor, any contrary? Thank you. Item number 19 is the 2018 operating budget variance for the Toronto Police Service period ending June 30th. Motion to approve. Okay, certainly. And item number 20 is the operating budget variance, and there's no, there's not operating budget variance for the parking enforcement unit for the period ending June 30th. Motion to approve. Councillor Hart, seconded Mr. Jeffers. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 21, there's a deputation. Item number 22 is the operating budget variance for June 2018 for the Police Services Board. Motion to approve. Mayor Tory, Ms. Sandra Casera. On 21, not on the 22. We've held 21. We're on 22. So again, Mayor Tory and Ms. Sandra Casera have proposed and seconded. All in favor for 22? Any contrary? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 23 is the Toronto City Council decision mitigation strategies to address the projected year-end unfavorable variance. Motion to approve. Councillor Hart, seconded Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 24 is City of Toronto Council decision operating variance report for the year ended December 31st, 2017. This is the Collision Reporting Center. Motion to receive. Ms. Nunziata, Ms. Sandra Casera, all in favor? Yep. Well, there's a deputation of one of them. We've tried that, Rupala, and unfortunately, there's always a deputation somewhere in the middle of the thing, so. Item number 25, City of Toronto Council closing the service gap in downtown east revitalization area. Motion to receive. It says receive here. Is it to approve?
To approve, because you're
Okay.
forwarding it to
Yep.
the chief.
Okay. So motion to approve, Ms. Shandakazera, seconded, Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 26, the quarterly report, occupational health and safety update, that is April 1 to
Like to
June
hold that,
30th.
Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hart. Item number 27 is the way forward, the second quarter update. There is a deputation, so we will hold that. Item number 28 is the semi-annual report, Toronto Police Service Board Special Fund on audited statement, January to June 2018. Motion to receive. Mayor Tory, seconded. Mr. Jeffers, all in favor. Any contrary? Thank you. Item number 29 is the 2017 annual report, the Toronto Transit Commission Special Constables. There's a deputation, so we'll hold that. And item number 30 is the annual report, the police towing contract, January to December 2017. Motion to receive. Ms. Nunziata and Councillor Nunziata, sorry, and Mr. Jeffers, all in favor. Any contrary? Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, that takes us back then to item number 7, which is the focused Toronto situation tables. Inspector Rizek and Sergeant Brian Smith are hopefully available to. Thank you, gentlemen. Great. Thanks, Dave.
I'm here to help out a little bit. He's got a wonderful presentation. He's going to go through all the stats for you.
Welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. I'll go through it quickly. There are a number of slides, so I'll try to highlight a couple of points. But first off, right off the bat, this is an equal collaboration between the City of Toronto, Toronto Police Service, and the United Way, full equal partners. There's not a day goes by that I don't talk or text or email my partners in those organizations, and we report up to a steering committee where our leadership is represented on the TPS and on the City and on the United Way. Deputy Ewan and designate is Staff Superintendent Mario Di Tommaso is our steering committee rep. So the situation table is designed for situations of acutely elevated risk. So those are the worst cases of at-risk and vulnerability where multiple risk factors come together in our communities. And the way into a table is through the agencies that bring those referrals. Not physically the person, but the story to help with supports. So as you can see, all the sectors are representative. The situations are all presented in a de-identified, privacy-protected manner. We can tell the story without talking about names, addresses, and date of births. We tell the story, agencies are identified based on the need, and then they form a huddle after the meeting where they're the experts. They decide what their intervention will be, and then that intervention happens within 24 to 48 hours, preferably by door knock, to offer those services. So it's very much a consent-based model. So just what it looks like, we have the 4 tables and the 4 divisions, 42, 23, 14, and 51. Here's an example of who is sitting weekly at Downtown East. So you can imagine, what we can do to attack some of these situations in our communities when this many agencies are together for a meeting. And the meetings go about an hour and a half. Downtown West, the visual as well. Downtown East is very much our biggest and most robust table by far. So I'll do a quick highlight of 2017 stats. So the 4 tables, total number of situations there. Connected to services, it's a consent-based model, but the way that we do the approach, it very much helps having those connections made. A lot of the individuals, they may have slipped through all the cracks of all the community supports, and this is the first time coming on our radar. Originating police, the biggest originator. We're 24/7. We see the most. We get all those calls in crisis, and we don't have the tools to be able to offer the services. So we bring the most referrals. And then, of course, on a responding side, we're still involved on a very small number, mostly because of we have the best rapport. There still may be a safety issue. So we support our partners on that intervention. So in January, I was asked for province stats, just kind of give you a highlight. So there's over 50 tables in the province. Their stats are very much similar to ours. They obviously do justice as opposed to police separate. So justice would include probation, parole, youth, and adult. So very much similar to ours. On the risk factors for 2017, you see the top five, 6 risk factors. It fluctuates very minor over the course of a year, but we always see the same one: mental health #1 and housing #2. Usually they're flipping back and forth. Highlighting the age groups, the biggest age group we see is 12 to 17 and 40 to 59. That seems to hold true throughout the year. Constantly, they may flip back and forth as the numbers come in. Province-wide as well, very similar. A couple subtle differences, but basically the same in the rest of the province. So for 2018, Q1, Q2, side-by-side comparison. First half of 2017, first half of 2018. A significant increase in the amount of referrals. And that's because all of our partners have been doing a lot of work in the communities with the community agencies. More people are joining the tables. Word is spreading, more referrals are coming up, not just from the police, but from our agency partners as well. Highlighting police only here. All 3 tables subtly different, but police bringing in the most referrals and supporting on the interventions. But what it clearly highlights is that we're bringing forth these situations where there's many other tools in the community we'd be able to support them. And a lot of these are originating from 911 calls or from other type of MCIT interventions, what have you. So again, 2018, similar risk factors that we see. So most agencies can deal with one risk factor because that aligns with their work, whether it's housing, mental health. But when there's many risk factors at once, it surpasses an individual agency's ability to deal with that situation. Then they can bring it to the table, and then the table, everyone else is able to support that one agency with the intervention and providing those supports that are needed. Originating, top lead, top assisting agencies. Many city agencies represented there. Toronto Housing, for instance, up in the Rexdale community, they bring a very significant amount of referrals, 25–30% of the referrals to that table. Very, very strong up in that part of the city, which is very helpful because I think we're getting these situations very far upstream from police. Results, connected to services, very high percentage. People may not be connected because they refuse, because it is a consent-based model. Maybe they moved, maybe we can't find them. There's a variety of reasons, but a very high connected to services rate. And that's a quick stats presentation.
Colleagues, I think, Dave, if that's the presentation, there's 3 deputations, I think.
Okay.
And I think we probably hear from them first and then come back to you guys. And I certainly have some questions, but great presentation, and thank you. And so just stand close by.
Thank you.
Danielle Pacey is the first person to depute. Danielle, you get 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
Thank you so much.
Towards the end, okay?
Sounds good. I'm a little bit sick, so I'm hoping I come through clearly. I'm a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice Toronto, aka SURGE, and I have a lot of questions about the report. Specifically, as was pointed out, mental health and housing are some big items on there. So the point I want to make is that we need to be putting money into safe and livable and affordable housing and in poverty alleviation, and the focus statistics seem to support that idea. And I do appreciate that the program redirects high-risk situations to organizations within whose scope those items fall, rather than keeping them in TPS's basket. I hear a lot of good words used in that presentation, like consent, community-based, collaboration. And looking at reports from the pilot for Focus Rexdale and at the attached report to this item, the main risk factor that Focus deals with in the situations it handles, are actually the two main statistics that it handles are mental health and housing. Now, the geographic areas that are being targeted through Focus are some of the areas of the city where finding affordable and social housing is really approaching a crisis level. Poverty and poor and secure housing conditions are considered determinations of health, including mental health. So I also note that the Focus report unfortunately lacks any sort of racial analysis for the people coming through the program, which seems kind of like a glaring omission when age and gender are both being reported on in detail. To that I add that some of the items in the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism include improve shelter and housing conditions, improve the quality and availability of city-programmed community health services, and maintain the mandate the collection and public reporting of race-based data for greater transparency. So these are all items that are of concern to me that don't seem to be reflected in the report. The data shows in the report and suggests that mental health and housing are things that can't be handled by TPS. They have to refer it elsewhere. And yet, $25 million in funding for mental health initiatives at the provincial level was recently earmarked for police services. That's a decent amount of additional cash flow coming into an already outsized budget. And I feel like I'm not saying anything new here at all. You've heard all of these data before. So I'll just reiterate that we need to address root causes by investing in good and affordable housing, safe housing. And we need to address poverty prevention if we hope to address violence. Focus puts a really nice, lovely community policing envelope around triaging mental health situations, but it seems to demonstrate a failure of the city to address root causes. So we can't be purely reactive. We need to be proactive, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, colleagues, for Danielle? Thank you very much, Danielle.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Carlin Basic. So 5 minutes, I'll give you a 1 minute warning as well. Thank you.
Okay. I'm also a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice Toronto, and I'll be echoing a lot of the same points that Danielle made. I want to highlight that in today's Focus report, within the top 20 risk factors to situations which require intervention, criminal behavior is 9th, and the top 8 prior to that are housing, diagnosed mental health problems, basic needs, suspected mental health problems, antisocial or negative behavior, poverty, threat to public health and safety, and alcohol. But then, despite this, obviously the police remain originators in the majority of these situations. So I'm wondering if that's maybe the logic in hiring 200 more cops to patrol areas that still haven't been disclosed to the public. Are these cops going to solve the housing crisis? Are they going to assist people in meeting their basic needs? Are they going to perform mental health interventions? None of which they have the expertise to do. What's more, if Focus is meant to foster greater trust in police services by mitigating their efforts with the expertise of mental health experts and community groups, then again I ask, why are there 200 more officers being hired? Why are there going to be more CCTV cameras and recording devices implemented in priority areas? Unless it's to capture on camera the community's growing trust, I don't really understand. And again, in a program that's being implemented in racialized communities, why is there zero data on race in the section outlining who you're serving? And how is the TPS planning on meaningfully addressing the disparity in how often BIPOC people are arrested without the proper data to do so? And how are any good intentions within Focus not being completely derailed by a greater police presence? And when are the top 8 risk factors in situations requiring intervention going to be meaningfully addressed? There are years of studies saying more policing is not the answer to addressing the critical issues in youth and gun violence. And for years, community members have been saying clearly and urgently that public housing is crumbling, that the minimum wage is not a living wage, and that Black and brown kids are being suspended and expelled from school at a higher rate. These voices are conspicuously missing from the evaluation of Focus, and to my mind, these voices are being ignored. So based on the evidence, it seems like Mr. Tory is hoping to solve long-standing issues like the housing crisis, inadequate mental health infrastructure, and deeply systemic racism by throwing a gun at them. And this is not in the best interest of the city of Toronto. Thanks.
Thank you, colleagues. Any questions? Yes.
Were you aware that in just the matching that we did of the provincial money that they just put in, that we said, I think by 2 to 1, that the money was going to be invested in the community and not in additional police resources? We just said that yesterday. Were you aware of that?
I wasn't, no.
Thank you.
I'd also point out that the additional police officers we're hiring is to maintain the levels that we want in future, because we've had a larger than usual retirement, in part because of the modernization. So it's not like we're just adding more policing, etc. Okay. Thank you very much for your deputation. May I then, I think the final one is Reuben Charles, who again is not here. So Inspector Rizek and Sergeant Smith, thank you very much. Colleagues, questions?
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I'm very familiar with the situation table model in the province, so I'm a big supporter of the model. I think it's shown some really great success across the board. I echo some of what the previous deputants had said about social determinants of health, and I think this type of table allows for you to bring those players together so that you can go upstream and address those issues. With that in mind, I guess my questions are around, again, the information sharing. So 2 questions. One, echoing what the deputant said, do you collect information by race? And secondly, of all the information that is shared at those tables, what are the considerations for privacy that you do have in terms of the collection of the information that you could share with us?
So maybe I'll address that first answer. So when this started up close to 5 years ago, there was extensive consultations with the Privacy Commissioner, as well as our partner agencies, because it's not just ours, right? We've got the city, we've got United Way on board, plus all of our partner agencies, over 100 that you saw up on the board there that have to sign on to this. So we follow the province's model of the risk tracking database, which does not collect race-based statistics. That was the model that we followed from the start. Is it something that we could revisit with all of our partners as well as the Privacy Commissioner? Sure, but it's something we'd have to consult with our partners on this first to go forward. So the second part of that question.
Yeah, it's de-identified data, so age ranges. We don't even use ages. You saw that, age ranges, genders. Certainly we have it narrowed down to a geographic area. That's basically it. It doesn't really go much deeper than that, and the risk factors, of course, right? So
sorry, I'm just picking up on a point that you shared earlier, that once you've identified someone at risk, you do door knocking, right, and offer them a service. So there is identified data. I just want to know that that information is protected.
Yeah, so at the beginning it is a consent-based model, so all the agencies that bring in referral have consent up front in the vast majority of cases to share the information, to be able to offer those supports. So only those agencies that are responding would have that data. Everybody else at the table would not.
Colleagues, other questions? Councillor Hart?
Yeah, just a quick one. I think the model's a great one. My question is around measuring impact. Do you have metrics that actually measure the impact of focus as it stands today versus before you had focus, and what the real difference is? How are you measuring that?
Yes, sir. There was an original study done, Dr. Hugh Russell and the Focus Rexdale pilot. We had a subsequent one done by Vision and Results, but the big one we have going on now is with Dr. Sarah Thompson from Ryerson University, and she's doing some other national comparisons as well. Very extensive. We're going to go back, a couple years before situation came to the table, look at kind of that picture, and then what happened at the table, which we can track. The difficulty is tracking it after, but certainly we can track to see if that individual came back on our database because they were our referrals in the first place. So that's kind of what is being done right now. The final results probably won't come out till the spring of next year, but probably about a year into it already.
So I have a couple of questions. The Focus Rexdale was the first table 5 years ago, is it right? So do you see any signs that, is there a maturity process in that's been going 5 years and the most recent one's been going a much shorter period of time? Do you see, is there a development in acceptance, in engagement, in anything you notice in that regard?
Yeah, as of a table, yeah, it becomes more agencies are joining. We're still having 2-3 agencies joining per month. 5.5 years we've been in Rexdale and could never get a hospital to join, but we recently been able to land Etobicoke General is going to be joining Focus Rexdale, so that's very much a good news story. Having such a solid partner at a table, especially for the mental health and those types of situations, is a big impact.
I think what you're seeing as well is as the tables mature, those partner agencies are actually participating and bringing situations forward. It's usually police driven, but as they mature, like in Rexdale, Toronto Community Housing, now that they understand the process and the effects that bringing someone to that table has, they're actually have a much further upstream approach to bringing those tables in. So instead of that call coming to the police and us making that referral, they're recognizing the situation first, aware of the focus table, and they're bringing that situation forward before it even gets to us.
And second of all, we've got 4 now, starting with 1 5.5 years ago. What is the projected amount, and what are the impediments to growth?
Scaling it up, there are challenges to scaling it up, not just for the 3 main organizations, but for all partners. That's certainly more tables, more meetings, more resources. That's for all the agencies, including on the TPS side. The way our model is, United Way covers the coordination, so the data, that's that piece, and then the City of Toronto and the Toronto Police equally do the co-chairing, because it's a very strong, rigid model, very strong co-chairing to prevent those privacy breaches and other types of issues. So it's usually a 2 co-chair position. So the challenges are obviously resources and staffing.
I think one of the biggest challenges is the capacity of those 100+ agencies you see there, and do they overlap in particular areas? Because may have the capacity to service this table, but if it overlaps into an expansion to another table, they may not have that capacity to service 2 tables.
Great. If there are no more questions, colleagues, thank you, gentlemen. Comments, discussion, colleagues? Mayor Tory?
I just wanted to say, and while you're still here, as you know, I had the opportunity to go out, because I sought it out. I wanted to try to go out in the last several months when we've faced quite a challenge on community safety and see as many programs as I could to see the ones that work, and I hadn't seen the focus table before. And I just want to say how incredibly impressed I was, because I'm sort of looking for places where you can see evidence that these things are working, and to see the collaboration that was around the table, and it was extraordinary, as between they're people all committed to the same cause, but it was sort of disparate groups that came from all over the place, including some very outspoken advocates who play a very important role, and others who are providing service, and others who are the police, and so on and so forth. To see, secondly, the respect that was offered inside that room for each case. I mean, the people weren't there, obviously, who were affected, but they were spoken about, and their cases and their circumstances in an entirely, respectful way that was all designed to try to help them, and it was just obvious from seeing that. And to see the commitment to this kind of holistic way of dealing with it, which came from the collaboration, was very impressive, and it certainly caused me to become more of an advocate. And it really speaks to one of the questions that the woman who spoke earlier in the deputation made, which is that I think part of what we announced in terms of measures to try and help keep the city safe was an expansion of the program, recognizing there are challenges to that in terms of finding the people to chair the tables and so forth. But we said we would commit to expanding it because one of the factors in my enthusiasm for that was that I'd seen it work. And I just want to say thank you for that. And as you said, each of these mature and in their own way and so forth. But this one was certainly very impressive for me to see in terms of all the people that were bringing their attention to bear on individual cases of individual people to help them, you know, get out of bad situations and to get their lives on track. So thank you very much.
All these other discussion questions? If not, a motion to, oh, Mark?
No, I was just going to note that when we speak about the modernization plan and the importance of having stronger partnerships to enhance community safety, this aligns with it perfectly. So the fact that we're able to expand from 1 to 4, we understand the value, and I really do take my hat off to the leadership that has taken place. It's gaining the trust of the agencies to have an understanding of what we're trying to do and how we get to the finish line, I think was understated. And the one key to the success is that everybody that's at the table are participants. They actively are engaged in wanting to help, and I think that makes a real critical difference when you do get an opportunity to see the work that is done.
Thanks, Chief. And again, let me just, Inspector Rizek and Sergeant Smith, thank you very much for the work. Thank you, first of all, for a great presentation, and but thank you very much for the work you're doing, and we all identify how important it is, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Colleagues, if there's no more, we need a motion to receive the deputations and receive the presentation. Ms. Shantakasera, seconded. Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 8 is another presentation, and it is Deputy Chief Shauna Coxon. It's the DMZ partnership, and Shauna, is it you or Ian? Perfect. We saw Ian setting up. We assumed it was him.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my distinct pleasure today to present to you with Abdullah Snowbar, the Executive Director of the DMZ at just down the street at Ryerson. Today we'll be giving you a little bit of an overview of the partnership that the Toronto Police Service has established with the DMZ, highlighting some really incredible youth in the city that we've worked with on a recent project called Hack TPS. To start that off, I'm going to pass it over to Abdullah, who will describe what the DMZ is, because a lot of people will find this to be a relatively new thing, although they do incredible, incredible work. And Abdullah will give us some insight into that.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you very much for having me, everybody. My name is Abdullah, as Ian mentioned. It's important to talk about the DMZ so it's not confused with the other DMZ in Asia. So here we are. So first of all, the DMZ, it's a world-leading technology accelerator program helping young people being able to build out innovative product and businesses that become Canadian and hopefully go global and really build social and economic impact. Our job really in that process is to help them grow and scale globally so they're not limiting their potential and what they're actually doing. The way we do that is by providing them with 4 things. It's really access to coaching, access to customers, capital, and community. And all this is really focusing on the international side, and we believe that we really do this in the best of ways. We've been around for 8 years right now. Some of our stats since then, I'll share a couple of these, but we currently have about 60 companies in our space living there who are using our resources. We have about 45,000 square feet right in downtown Toronto. One of the buildings that we actually use also for, which we used this program for, was formerly Sam the Record Man building, which is now the Student Learning Center, which is an incredible space with about 12,000 people using that building on a daily basis. Our acceptance rate is 7.4%, which makes it an extremely competitive program, but really shows the actual demand that's coming through the environment that we're in. Our companies have been able to raise close to $500 million in funding, and this number really is more towards the past 3 to 4 years. So it's a substantial amount of funding that Canadians and Torontonians have been able to really bring together, and the amount of jobs that have been created has actually been well over 3,000 jobs right now. So it's obviously very positive in terms of what the actual impact really is here. One thing that's important to mention, being a leading city, Toronto being in a lot of our minds here the best city in the world, we've also been ranked #1 in the world as a tech incubator and accelerator. So something not just important for the DMZ, not just for Toronto, but for Canada as a whole. This is actually amongst 480 other incubators globally. So something substantial. Mayor Tory was actually there to announce this, so we were very happy, and something that we continue to push out the message. I won't get into this too much, but really, we have an entire linear process for supporting entrepreneurs, although we do recognize that entrepreneurship has never been linear, nor will it ever be. But this is we support people from ideation, validation, all the way into acceleration and growing their businesses. So our partnership, as Ian mentioned, with TPS and DMZ was substantial. And I got to first and foremost start off by saying thank you to the leadership. Chief Saunders, Deputy Coxon, obviously these things can never actually happen without having support from the top. We had the good fortune of working with Ian Williams right from day one, and it's been an incredible partnership which really showcased, an equal partnership I should say, which really showcased TPS as being an innovative organization focusing on being agile and supporting the community at large. We have seen tremendous outcomes from this, and I know that you'll hear from a couple of our companies in a few minutes, but the impact of this really puts a lot of things on the table. And I got to mention first and foremost, this has become a benchmark on innovation for the entire city and if not the province. We've actually been able to leverage a stronger partnership with Ontario Public Service because of this kind of partnership. We're talking to Toronto Public Health because of this right now. So TPS and all the great work that's been done here has really opened up a lot of opportunities for us to be able to engage further in the city, to focus on community, to focus on people and making people's lives better while we're here. So I can't tell you how fortunate we are to have worked with TPS and how incredible it really was. We've really enjoyed this process. The people from the event have really enjoyed the process, and I truly believe in order to sustain such impact, we'd love to see TPS and the DMZ continue working together to support startups across the city, and we really think the value is there for all. So I'll pass it back to Ian, and we'll go from there.
Great. So I'll give a little bit of an overview about the Toronto Police Service first hackathon. This was also a Canadian first for law enforcement, being able to engage in a competition that brought together over 150 top developing talent in Toronto to produce, at the end of that time, functioning products that will better public safety and help communities engage further in the city of Toronto. We had a number of goals, putting communities first, being information-led, optimizing resources and technology, embracing partnerships, of course, which is a key part of our modernization plan, and also recognizing the benefits that local startups can have engaging with an organization like ours in the public sector, and also being able to engage further with local youth. Project goals were to actually build something tangible that was an outcome of that hackathon. And so we were able to use some real-time data, part of our public safety data portal release, as well as something that can work on a mobile device so that can be used by any community member. The problem statement was fairly broad, and we didn't want to restrict the competitors within this competition, looking at how we increase awareness about public safety in Toronto across all of our neighborhoods. How do we strengthen the relationship between police and the community? And how do we bring community together to discuss issues pertaining to public safety? The results were a winning team and a runner-up team, so very, very close, tight competition. And both of those teams are here today. I'm just going to play a quick video that's going to provide a lot of insight into what that day looked like, or competition look like, and that will lead off into us actually getting some presentations from the two teams. So I will invite our winning team, 51.5 Jump Street, now known as Civitas Tech. They've incorporated, and since the hackathon, both teams have continued to do work on this, and they're going to present to you the pitch that they gave on the day of the competition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Right. Hello, members of the board. My name is Jane, and these are my teammates, Akash and Kevin. And we're honored and excited to be here today to talk to you about our work as of the Hack TPS Hackathon. So as Ian mentioned, we joined together at the hackathon, and then working with the brilliant mentors from the DMZ and the TPS, we're able to build a product that in the end, with which we won the hackathon. And going forward, we realized that this product essentially had potential for engaging communities, for bringing together our city, and for using our information and our citizens for the bettering of our community, and decided that we want to take this forward and incorporate as a company with the DMZ, and thus formed Civitas Tech. So a little bit of background as to the mindset we were going into this project with is that today, annually, Canadians make over 12 million 911 calls every single year. And then over 40% of these calls are for non-emergency matters. As this evidently points out, is a misuse of both fiscal and physical resources that the police does manage, and only prolongs the times that people wait on 911 calls. At the same time, we have surveys reporting that Canadians have experienced an increase in social isolation over the last decade, and 50% of Canadians report to not even know their neighbors. Now, the trend we see here is that lower community engagement leads to more reliance and more usage of 911 resources for matters that could be resolved within one's neighborhood. If one were to know your neighbors, you could call upon them for when you needed help. But this is not being the main issue. All these matters culminate to a lack of involvement in one's neighborhood, to lower voter participation, and even to the compromise of safety and well-being of our local neighborhoods. These matters cannot be tackled one at a time, but we need to be asking the larger questions of how do we engage the public in their community. So to respond to this, our team came across Sir Robert Peel's quote, which reads, "The police are the public and the public are the police." It's a mantra by which we built our entire vision, and essentially aim to have citizens crowdsource their resources, be this both intellectual and physical, in order to help one another and contribute to the policing of our city. Through this, we can build a smarter city, one that relies on data and relies on its community members, rather than just placing the entire onus on the police. So with this objective, we built Civitas Tech, the 21st century neighborhood engagement and involvement and crowdsourcing. what our product does is essentially, it is a platform, an all-in-one for individuals within a community, be their home community and their work community, to engage with those around them. So the very first platform, as was illustrated here, is a news feed where individuals can keep up to date with all events taking place in their locality. This can also be used for counselors to communicate with their neighborhoods. It can be used for any kind of events going on around the city and just for people to keep tabs on what's happening around them. The second tab in our app is a forum monitored by an artificial intelligence, where individuals can post requests for service and or kind of concerns they have about non-emergency issues. Let's say you come home and see a tree fallen right in front of your yard. You don't know what to do. There are a number of resources indicating that people would simply just react to this by calling 911. However, this is a matter for either 311, 211, 411. And so what our platform does is it reads the message, using machine learning, interprets it, and then funnels it to the appropriate agency automatically, requiring no intervention from any external body. Once you place the photo and add it to the platform, people from your community can see what you have posted, but the individual is kept fully anonymized. So no one can see who is posting what, but can contribute and say, oh, I've had a tree fall and they told me not to come near the electrical wiring it may have inflicted damage upon. And just essentially allowing your neighborhood to help you with your emergency matters, but all placing information in this one convenient space. So the third tab is a engagement forum. So this forum is used to either communicate within the neighborhood, but also for people to post actionable items for their community to take to participate in. So this is essentially where the main component of our platform comes in. The reason people would use this is partially for the incentivization. So individuals here can post information about, let's say, a park cleanup they want to do all together. This is another matter that often gets deferred to the police, but not a policing matter that resources should be spent on. We have individuals who can organize this park cleanup all together, bettering their community, but also, for each individual task, earning rewards. Once they complete the task, they earn reward points, which can be redeemed at a local business, which we are currently working to partner with. In aggregate, all the points earned by individuals within the community are placed on a leaderboard. This leaderboard ranks your community on a scale compared to the others, essentially gamifying this process and encouraging people to compete between communities for a ranking on this board. Now, for contributing, now you can do volunteer work in your own community, but also in the communities ranked below yours. And by contributing to communities lower on the leaderboard than you earn points in multiples of what you would for your own community. This essentially works to bridge socioeconomic gaps created by those who, let's say, are living in a well-off community, able to contribute time to volunteering. By bettering the community of someone in need, you are earning points for yourself, but also helping the city in creating what is a smarter, safer, and better Toronto. So at present, we are currently in the process of deploying our website, likely to be up later today, but are also on track to pilot this product in 4 neighborhoods in Toronto. And so we've done research on 140 of the neighborhoods available and are seeking further guidance as to exactly where to begin this pilot. We're looking to integrate with other smart city projects in the community and hope to engage your help in doing so. At present, our overarching mission is simply to bring communities together. Bring communities together in order to crowdsource information, use data to better our overall experience living here as citizens, and to make sure that everybody is able to keep in touch when they need to be. This alleviates a lot of work from the police, and then further helps build Toronto as a smart city and Canada as a smart country. This platform is incredibly scalable, and we look to advance it to a national scale and even to the point of international affairs. And something incredibly important to have stemming here from Toronto as a local startup. So what we come to ask of you today is for initially help selecting our pilot communities and essentially getting the wisdom on what other smart city projects have taken place where and where they have seen success. Further on seeking insights for the sector, as we are all kind of versed in the technology behind this application, but would be very much privy and grateful to have your assistance in understanding the nuances behind city projects and identifying the groups, partners, and agencies to collaborate with in our vision for building a smarter Toronto. And finally, having had such an incredible experience working with the Toronto Police in developing this product, we would like to open up the invitation for members of this board to join our Civitas Tech Advisory Board and help us in further decision making and working towards this common goal and mutual vision of a safer, better, smarter Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. And thank you, colleagues, for not only a very innovative and it sounds like a very fun project, but one that can be extraordinarily useful. And so thank you very much. Colleagues, the questions of either Abdullah or Ian or the three members of the winning team.
Yes, I've got a question for the three members of the winning team. Can you just run through an example? You mentioned a tree down, put in information, somehow it links to the appropriate service area. Can you just give me an example of how that linkage works electronically?
Yes. Do you want to?
Yeah. So for that, once a post is made on our forum, we would use natural language processing, which is a mechanism which a computer can understand human language, such that it can direct, okay, what type of message it is. We have tested the proof of concept of this during our hackathon. So we tested for 911, 311, and 211. So once we take a picture of the tree, we're thinking of using the geotag location, so we'll know where exactly the location is, and thus providing the the appropriate agency to reach out there.
Have you had any linkages with any city divisions to talk about your technology, like 311, for example?
We're more looking at open data gov, so we are trying to establish a connection using DMZ and this meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah, you mentioned you're looking for pilots. So where, have you had any thought on where you want to do the pilot?
So we were the open data government was the really useful data for us. There were 140 neighborhoods, but we are looking for something where there are more schools and NGOs because there are volunteer opportunities. The Stats Canada reported that over 2,000 million hours has been spent volunteering. And in one of our appendix slides, we do see the age group where people volunteer. So we're targeting population based on these neighborhoods, but we would definitely require your advice and feedback to finalize on that decision.
Thank you.
Mayor Tory was next, and then you, Ken.
Just a comment, when Councillor Nunziata asks those questions, she'd be delighted, I'm sure, to have you come and tell her that you would do it in her area. She's always very modest about saying that, but I think I'm right. I hear her ask those leading questions, and I always know what that's really hinting at. I think it's maybe for Ian and from Abdul from DMZ. Do you think there's a further opportunity? Because I by the way, I came to the finals or the final, and I saw this group win, but I also saw there was a whole room full of people who were as bright as these three, repeated with many, many teams, and I think the whole thing was an incredibly eye-opening exercise for me in terms of all the ideas people had. Point of my question is to ask if there are other opportunities for collaboration between DMZ and this kind of thing and the police service, because I think it's a it's a good way to tap into these bright minds and get these ideas. It's really part of what the chief's trying to do with, and we all are, with modernization, but in this case it's using the bright minds we might otherwise not encounter. I'm talking about particular other startups too that could emerge out of this, that could help us and help other people.
Absolutely. I think this is on. Yeah. Okay. So we've obviously had a huge opportunity to learn about what the DMZ has to offer the startup community, not only in Toronto, but Montreal, Waterloo, for example, across the country. And what we've established with the DMZ can probably grow. I believe we can expand upon that and establish really a continued innovation program that would facilitate working with other startups on an ongoing basis and finding that value for the City of Toronto. I am also well aware of a number of city divisions, Transformation Office, Innovation Office, Entrepreneurship Office, that we could engage with to formalize something in that regard that would make it whole of city approach. And I believe there are quite a few opportunities to expand this.
Any other questions, colleagues? Sorry, Ken, you had your hand up. I apologize.
You obviously have a very innovative and creative approach to bringing about some change in the city. When you talk about the selection of the neighborhoods, what sort of criteria are you looking for in the selection of these neighborhoods?
So we would like different insights. We would try it in like a well-off area where there's some where the economic conditions are good. We would also like to try somewhere the economic conditions are not so good, so we can try to bridge those gaps. Other than that, we would also like to make sure, like, when people buy a house, the first thing they look for is safety, education, and engagement in the community. So we identify that way where there's max, min, and average, such that we can try to bridge the gap and make it grow as a city together.
Okay, colleagues, if there are no other questions, again, Ian, Abdullah, and winning team, and I gather, looking at your resumes up there, I gather you're multiple winners. Is that, Jane, you've won 4 times? Was that telling me up there? Congratulations. Anyway, listen, thank you all very much, and we're delighted to continue to participate. Ian, thank you for taking the lead on this, and Shauna. Oh, there's one more team? Oh, great. Okay. That was just a teaser. That's great. So, again, congratulations. Thank you. And Ian, you've got another team to present? Great.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys, I didn't want to shortchange you, but welcome.
We're still here.
Thanks.
Here you go.
Good afternoon. We are Team Nova. We met at the Toronto Police Hackathon back in June, where we had a great time and a unique opportunity to speak with various Toronto Police members and to try our hand at coming up with a solution to improve the current 911 system. Our team is composed of 4 highly talented and unquestionably motivated individuals. There's Naif, who has a bachelor's degree in software engineering, and 3 developers who are working around the city and are only high school students. Alexander, who's an AI researcher, Aghosh, who's a blockchain developer, and myself, who am a developer focusing on AI. During the hackathon, we spoke to a number of police officers and gained a new perspective on the limitations of the current 911 system. This is our solution. Imagine you're lying on a beach in Cuba. The sun's shining, you're sipping on a pina colada. You come back home and the door's unlocked. That's strange. You step inside and your house is trashed. The drawers are taken out, your table's smashed. You've just experienced a break-in. You panic and you call 911. The operator says an officer will be there within 3 hours. 3 hours? You can't wait that long. Your kids have to go to school. You have to be at work. And the house, it's a mess. Why can't the officer come earlier? Because he's off on a wild goose chase after a stray dog. Unfortunately, this is not just a made-up scenario, but a daily reality. 7,000 homes are broken into every year with an average wait time of 3 hours. Why is the wait time so long? Because 40%, 2 out of 5 911 calls are not 911 related. This drains the resources of the Toronto Police because even though a lot of these calls are not 911 related, they still have to respond to them, even if it's wasting their time or not even their responsibility. Furthermore, police officers have stated that there's an inefficiency in communication between the police and the community. If you think about it, most interactions are not positive. A police officer is either arresting someone or talking to someone who's just had the worst day of their life because they've just experienced a crime. Our solution, NOVA. NOVA streamlines the data collection for the Toronto Police and reduces wait time for 911 emergencies that actually matter. Traditionally, in the previous example of a break and enter, a user would call 911 and then wait until a police officer arrives on the scene. With NOVA, a user would call 911 and then, after being determined a non-emergency situation, they would speak to NOVA until the officer arrives on the scene. This is a demonstration of how NOVA works in a break and enter scenario. It first begins by double checking to make sure it is in fact a non-emergency situation. After doing so, it tells the victim to remain calm and tells the victim to resist the urge to clean up anything, as this is an instinctual urge that many people don't understand can compromise the investigation. After gaining consent, NOVA proceeds to gather information about the crime, asking the same tombstone information questions that an officer would have anyways had to ask upon arrival at the scene. But now, an officer, once arriving at the scene, gets a neat, clean document containing all the information he needs to begin his investigation without any delay. NOVA can also be used in another way. If a user knows they have a non-emergency situation, but they don't know what number to call, they can contact NOVA directly, and NOVA will redirect them to the correct service, whether it be 311, public health, animal services, or even general inquiries. NOVA, but if someone does call 911 and it is not an emergency, the operator can redirect them to NOVA. NOVA will then gather more information about the situation and send them to the correct service. NOVA has a profound impact on the Toronto Police and the City of Toronto as a whole. It saves money, as even though NOVA works 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, it doesn't take vacations. It improves accessibility, as we found that many people don't want to download an app. So we chose to make NOVA available on a large variety of platforms, including social medias and text, with future voice abilities in progress. NOVA improves data collection, as the data collects is instantly and securely sent to the Toronto Police database without the need of any manual or paper involvement. NOVA reduces the amount of time wasted, whether it be the precious minutes of the 911 operator or the monotonous hours spent by the officer in the field. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, NOVA improves public relations, because now not every interaction has to be negative. NOVA is simple, yet elegant. Due to its virtual design, NOVA can be easily and seamlessly implemented and removed to allow for a smooth transition and a safe pilot phase. NOVA is a next-generation 911 service with a bright future that can help Toronto as a smart city. NOVA is adaptable. It can be augmented and upgraded at the touch of a button to make sure it's always ahead of changing times. And NOVA is a long-term solution. It won't become obsolete within 2 years because NOVA is fundamentally built on an artificial intelligence algorithm that improves automatically over time. This means that the more NOVA is used, the better it gets. Toronto, technology shapes our world. Toronto has recently become an international technology hub for the world. Let's not let the Toronto Police fall behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. Colleagues, questions? Okay, Abdullah, that's you should be very proud. Congratulations, the both teams. Outstanding work, and we really appreciate and look forward to an ongoing relationship. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Ian, thank you. Is there anything you want to add?
I think one of the things to further on our response to the mayor's question is this is part of what we view as a larger innovation program with the service, and we could come back and demonstrate how the work that we've done so far, including some of the presentations you've seen here, is best in class globally. As Abdullah mentioned, we are leading the way in a number of areas here, and it would probably help if we came back and actually presented how that program is unfolding.
Chief Saunders?
Yeah, no, I just want to personally thank DMZ for the partnership, and to both teams, congratulations on fantastic jobs. And, you know, here's an example where there's an upside and downside to the raw data piece in that discussion in law enforcement right now. The majority of agencies do not want to provide raw data. And yet we have so many members of the community, we have so many of our young members that are so smart and plugged in. With the same information we've had access to for years and years, we would not be able to come up with any of these ideas whatsoever. So the opportunities for expansion, for growth, for development, and leveraging technology, because that is the way of the future. This is a very strong starting point for I think, things that we need to robustly move forward on and quickly if we're going to get this right. So once again, thank you so much, and I look forward to the continued partnerships.
If I can just touch on that very quickly, sorry, just on Chief Saunders and Mayor Tory's points. You know, what we see is what we've seen, but I think the best part about this stuff is actually the unknown. There's so, you know, if this was a book, we're still on, you know, page 1 of chapter 1, and there's so much more to go still. And I think that's the really exciting part of all this, that it becomes a leading ability to kind of look at how we leverage technology to support people, communities, and overall safety in so many different ways. So we're excited about this, and again, we're really excited that TPS has really championed the way from public service and being able to kind of showcase what the possible actually is. So thank you to everybody.
Well, Abdullah, thank you, and thank you for your comments. And you know, this was a key portion of the modernization process, was leveraging technology and being best in class. So Ian, to answer your question, I think keep pushing, just keep coming forward, and particularly if Abdullah's right, we're only on page 1 of chapter 1. But you know, I think it's important that you keep pushing the agenda forward. It is a key component, you know better than anybody, of the modernization process. But like everything, it has to be brought forward, and so we look forward, and congratulate these 7 individuals and the fabulous work they've done, but looking forward to many of the next leaders that are coming forward, because this can make a huge difference for us. So thank you to the 2 successful teams. Congratulations, and thank you very much, Ian Abdullah and Deputy Coxon. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, motion to receive the presentation and presentations and the report. Councillor Hart, seconded Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you very much. Chief Saunders, you were going to provide us with an update on the implications coming forward with the cannabis legislation, and there's one deputation after that from Chris Langenfeld, and so if you want to
yes, sure. Thank you, Chair. And just, I'll be very brief, as there are so many ongoing discussions and a lot of unknowns at this particular point in time. But I can say that as the legalization of cannabis becomes an issue effective in October, the provincial government has one of the factors of distribution, and that is something that the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police has a working group with multi-agencies to figure out what it takes to get right. We're looking forward for the opportunities for funding from provincial as well as the federal entities that are in play. Having said that, the one thing that I think is critical is that even though I'll be working with, and I am working with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, there are going to be some issues and some pressures that I think that will be Toronto-centric, and those issues obviously will include the roadway safety, considering we have 5,600 kilometers of roadway, and having the proper resources and the funding to adequately put into place right now is something that we have in the works. And as well as tourism, which I think is going to play a critical factor once it does become legalized. And there will be quite a few pressures. And so having an understanding of working with the board to figure out what we need to do and what steps we need to take in order to have the proper messaging so that we don't overload the call boards or the calls for service or provide expectations that people will probably have, but they won't because the law is the law. I think internally as well too, I know we have spoke candidly on a discussion with the legalization of marijuana and what effect that will have from an employment perspective. And so again, I'm looking at talking with the OACP and the CACP and figuring out as law enforcement what will be the rules of engagement for ingesting any type of cannabis or with employment, and it is something, as I said, we'll look at a national and a provincial level, as well as looking across the border, because some of the states have things in play already. I can tell you that some agencies do have workplace and drug procedures in Canada as well as the United States. So we look forward to exploring that and then having an opportunity of talking with the board henceforth.
Great. Thank you, Chief Saunders. I think before I ask for questions and discussion, take the one deposition, and that's Chris. And Chris, you know the rules. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I hope I know the rules by now. So, Chief, I just wanted to ask this has been obviously put off nationally in large part by response from police forces that said they wouldn't be ready for earlier rollout. And so I guess every time I hear that, my thought is, well, aren't we already expecting our officers to know if they think that somebody's impaired while driving, or whether they're supposed to know the signs of, be it red eyes, a bag of potato chips on the front seat, and laughing constantly. So I'm just wondering from the policing side, what is missing? What is it that you need to ramp up other than training the officers in what they're theoretically already being trained in other areas that most of them we would expect, I think, already know these issues?
So, Chris, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Any questions for Chris? Okay, Chris, thanks.
But no response, right?
Well, you know, it doesn't work that way. Thank you. Colleagues, questions, comments, discussion? Councillor Nunziata, Mayor Tory, and Councillor Hart.
I guess to ask the chief to, maybe you can respond to that question, and then I'll ask my question.
Yeah, it's a little oversimplified. Yeah. In order, law enforcement, police officers are allowed general opinion, but in order to be specialized, in order to have that conviction, you have to have qualifications. You have to pass standards that are set, in this case, by IACP when it comes to THC. And so the drug recognition evaluators are something that are critical, as well as the standard field sobriety testers. And right now, within our agency, we have 317 of the sobriety testers. We have 15 of the drug recognition evaluators. We are looking to improve that. We've got some more that we sent out. The issue that we have is the only area for testing is in Orlando, and there are only a limited number of positions available at any given time. I know the federal government has provided funds on a federal level. I'm hoping that part of that is to incorporate a provincial location for that, so that we can bypass the amount of money spent on sending people to Orlando for the testing. We can keep it closer, more local, distribute the funds more accordingly with what they're needed for, instead of just getting to and from the location. So we are looking at upping those numbers and hopefully making those changes structurally so that we can get that done. But it's one thing to have a general opinion, and another to have an opinion as an expert in a court of law to try to register a conviction.
So part of that federal funding, it's obvious that we would, once it's legal, we would need more resources, as well as resources for the dispensaries that we have throughout the city that are illegal. So how are we going to address the additional resources that we need to close these dispensaries that we can't do now, that we don't have that power to close these up?
Well, we do have the power to, and we started doing that with Project Claudia quite some time back. There has to be an alignment with the federal prosecutors, number one, in order to get it right from the enforcement apprehension piece to the presentation before the courts. I know that the federal government is aware of that, and I have been told that there will be funding that will be specific to those things because they have brought them up themselves. And so I look forward to seeing exactly how those conversations are going to carry on in the next short period of time so that we can provide a better answer to everybody as to how that's going to play out.
So once it becomes legal, then we would have those additional powers, because right now, when we close them up and we raid them, they're arrested, they open up immediately the next day. So we will have, once it's legal, that we will have those additional powers for the city and the police and the courts to close them up permanently.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the additional powers are going to be. If once legal distribution involves having a license from Health, Ministry of Health, and so anyone that does not purchase or have a license from there, it will be illegal. How that plays out, and I'm hoping that there's coordination with the city as well as with us for many aspects, if there are ways that we can get in front of before people set foot in the building for the purpose of selling unlawful products. Hopefully there are different approaches and different avenues that we collectively can take in order to reduce the opening of illegal dispensaries.
Thank you.
Next. It's just sort of following up on the distribution thing, which I guess the province has said they're going to conduct extensive consultation on in terms of the retail and so forth. Is there a place now, and if there is, I'm delighted, but I don't know of it, is there a place now where we are sitting with you to make sure that the voice we speak with when you talk about Toronto and some of its special considerations, including the fact that some of our surrounding municipalities have said they're not going to allow for distribution, so that will place more pressure on whatever distribution is going on here, because I don't think Toronto would be saying we're not going to have distribution here. So I just want to make sure we're, among others, that the police and the city are going to jointly participate in whatever the process is the province has to make sure our views are known given the size of the city and some of those complexities you were referring to.
I believe at some point in time those conversations and those meetings will take place. The only committee that I have right now that I'm working with is the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police with President Greenwood and the various entities within law that are having those candid discussions. I'm not sure where they go from there at this point, but I certainly, the more lenses that we bring to the table, the better the product at the end of the day. And I know that the distribution has shifted in how it's going to take place. So it's very new to us as well too, and so the devil is in the details, and I'm not sure what that looks like yet, and I'll wait for that presentation, and then any way in which we can help, we certainly will put our best efforts in for that.
Councillor Hart, you were next.
So I have a motion that I'd like to put up if staff have it ready. Just a different line of questioning, Chief. Every organization, along with the police service and you as the head of the organization, may or may not encounter situations with staff members, officers, civilian staff, and fitness for duty. Just wondering if you've turned your mind to that and whether or not you could report back to the board on your thoughts on this matter. And I've got a motion in that regard up there. I don't think the service will be any different than any other organization. It's just something I think we should get in front of.
The
motion is
chief
to
come back to the
come back to the board with a report concerning the occupational health and fitness for duty implications for the service associated with legalization of cannabis, and keep in mind that the legalization is just around the corner on October the 17th.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Councillor Hart. So Councillor Hart's putting that forward. Is there a seconder for the motion? Ms. Chandrasekaran, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hart. Any further questions or follow-ups, Councillor Hart?
No. That's fine.
Okay, Ms. Chandrasekaran, and then Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you. As much as this is a policing issue, it's also a public health issue, right? Because cannabis is not a benign substance. So I was just wondering if there are any plans to engage with Toronto Public Health in terms of messaging around this, public education, especially around the dangers around consumption and driving and operating a motor vehicle, that kind of thing.
Yeah, when it comes to public safety, we will definitely be hands-on with that. When it comes to the messaging piece, I think that it is an important discussion to have, an awareness and an education piece, and the difference between the edibles versus, the type of consumption and the effects that it can have, I think are very critical and very necessary to have in order to make sure that people are informed so that they can have an understanding of what situations they may put themselves in when it comes to ingesting and using a motor vehicle, in particular from a law enforcement perspective. But, I've had discussions with people in the construction business as well. And so they've got some huge concerns with the heavy machinery. And so there are a lot of moving parts to this. And I think that not just law enforcement, but I think government as a whole needs to have a good and robust conversation on that.
Francis, you had something?
Yes, I would like to speak.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'm very frustrated, and as well as my community, because in particular in my ward, we've had 3 storefront dispensaries, and there's another 2 that's popping up. That has been a problem for the last 6 or 7 months. And we've received a number of complaints, and we forwarded on to 12th Division, and the officers, and with the city, with MLS, have gone out to these locations. We have raided them. There's one that we raided 5 times, which I personally went on one, where we actually took the sign down, we took all the equipment out, all the marijuana, all the phones, everything out, arrested. 2 days later, they reopened. New sign, they've got the computers in, and they keep opening. And this is like 5 times. And it continues to happen. Now, there's a lot of resources that have gone into this. And so what my concern is that when it does become legal, do we have the resources to close these ones down? And I've been told by the city once it becomes legal, then we'll be able to have the bylaws in place and the power to work with the police services to actually close them down permanently, and then when and arrested. So that's what I'm waiting for. That's what I'm telling my community, is we have to wait till it becomes legal in order to permanently close these establishments down. So it's really been frustrating. And I do realize, and the reason they keep reopening the next day is they're making thousands of dollars in revenue a day, and they're near schools, near parks, and you just can't close them up. And so that's really frustrating. So I'm just hoping that we do have the tools and resources that we do need to close these storefronts and these illegal ones down. And I don't know what the province is planning on doing, but it's a real concern of mine. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Any other comments, colleagues? If not, Mark, thank you. Obviously, evolving. And do you want to make another comment, Mark? Yep, go ahead.
I mean, we can certainly have a sidebar on that. And if the new laws will give municipalities more powers, then that does provide an opportunity for stronger alignment with police and city agencies to do what we can do to keep things shut down and kept shut down.
Okay, if there's no more comments or discussion, again, Chief Saunders, thank you for the update, an evolving situation, obviously, and one that everybody's focused on. May I have a motion, colleagues, to receive the chief's report as well as the deputation from Mr. Langenfeld? Ms. Shandy-Casera, seconded Mr. Jeffers. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. So that is item number 9. Next on the list is item number 11, where there is, this is the board policies and accommodation, and there is a deputation from Miguel.
Mr. Pringle, I'm going to start with a question to you. You are the author of this report, isn't it? Mr. Pringle? Hello? Okay, he doesn't want to answer. You are the author of this report.
Yep.
And in this report, you don't include the members of the public, do you? You don't include them?
Miguel, you know the rules. You
okay,
make a deputation. It's not a question.
Questions directly to the matter.
Right.
But I'm going to ask you one thing. You
just make your presentation.
Your staff has said that you have solved the issue of the washrooms, the issue last month. Last month, the issue of the washrooms was not resolved. You can say whatever you want to say to me today in order to make me happy. But that matter hasn't closed in my books because I was never given proper information about the closure of the washrooms last month. Your staff of the chief of police were blocking the entrance to the all-gender award winner washroom that Chief Sanders openly said, in order to make peace with the people of Pride, we're going to create an all-gender washroom, but your staff decided to make it only for the staff last month. And I talked to Kevin about it. Kevin says, you know what, it's not me. You have to talk to Chief Sanders. Chief Sanders is not responding. I talked to his officers. They don't want to take any bad responsibility. I'm going to read what it says about this policy. The Toronto Police Services Board is committed to the principle that every person has a right to receive police services without discrimination or harassment, as provided by law, including the Ontario Human Rights Code. And it says that here on page 15, the chief of police will ensure that accommodations is provided to the point of undue hardship. Undue hardship. And that didn't happen last week. All they were telling me, the officers, is to go to the main floor to use the facilities. They were not trying to let me in this washroom or that washroom over there. And so what happened? Can we find out what really happened last week? Who screwed up with the washrooms? Why the washrooms were close to these disabled men? I had diabetes. I need to go to the washrooms in several occasions. But it's very complicated to find out your logic, to closing the washrooms to the public. Nevertheless, I know you're going to deny it. You can ensure that this is never brought up to the public attention, but let me tell you one thing. Mr. Mayor Tory, I'm glad that you're here with us now in the public community. I just want to remind you that I told to Mr. Chip Sanders that when he's going to spend those $25 million that Doug Ford has allocated for the city to combat crimes, guns, violence, instead of the money, allocate some money for the cameras, to the body-worn cameras, because we need to keep our office accountable. So please, I'm going to remind you, Mr. Tory, you need to have the money we used for our safety. And another thing I want to ask, what are you going to do with 2 members when the province is fighting to cut the council numbers from 47 to 25? Have you any concern of how many members of the community will be represented as in this table? There will be no Councilor Hart, there will be no Councilor Nasiata, there will be not even yourself. I don't know how many people will be part of this board. That is my biggest concern. In order to ensure that the process is open to the public, we need to include more members of the community. I know. I am making concerns of the community.
last week. The reality is both the board office and the chief's office, I understand, responded to you. It is now back to the status it was before. So thank you very much for your concern and your input. If you've got anything else you want to add about the specific report, please do so. You've got about a minute.
But then main inclusion of the people that comes to the board. We come to the board and we need to be respected. Our human rights had to be respected, not trashed like last month. My human rights were trashed by overpaid officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Any questions, colleagues, for Miguel? Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to receive the deputation and approve report number 11? Councilor Nunziata, seconded Mr. Jeffers. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. That takes us to item number 15, which is there's a deputation, and this is the supply and delivery of parking tickets, and this is Chris. You know the rules, Chris, including stick to the topic, please.
So my issue here is simply this $1 million basically for producing the electronic paper rolls, and I noticed that once again the service is going with its recent standard of using Mercs, and this idea that, well, you'll just put somewhere that you're looking for stuff and you'll hope people come and provide you the best price. And of course, the rest of us in the world know that when you're looking for reasonable prices and you're not looking to waste money, you go out and try and find better and cheaper suppliers. The fact is, the suppliers that aren't charging the most money aren't going to be having somebody on staff that's going to sit there and read through Merck's quotes that are out there. They're not going to pay the money to buy the opportunity to see what's or to be a member of Merck so that they can see what's being quoted on. The fact is that even in your reports here, we don't know what the criteria were for this quote, so you couldn't even go out and try and see what a competitive quote would be. I know when I was out looking for business cards for my mayoral run here, I had to go talk to probably half a dozen printing places to try and get prices, and those prices certainly ranged from probably within 5 times of the same price for printing jobs. So I'm sure we could easily go out and find less than $5.80 a roll for basically adding machine tape, albeit yellow with printing on the back. That pricing certainly seems to be ridiculous when you take a look at what it would cost if you wanted to go out and buy this as individuals. You wouldn't be paying that kind of price. And so I expect that we're probably overpaying for a lot of things, and this is just one example of it. And so I hope the board will, and really the city as a whole, will look at some options instead of simply posting something on the internet somewhere and hoping that somebody will go buy the information for the opportunity to quote. That's certainly how you ensure that suppliers overbid on their prices, by having a limited pool of people that are willing to look at and spend the time in getting quotes for government contracts. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any follow-up questions, colleagues? Chris, thanks. Motion to receive the deputation and approve the... Yes, absolutely. Sorry, Francis.
Okay, so how much are we paying now for the parking for the paper?
I'm not sure right now. We could certainly get that information to you, but just to clarify, we did go out. Merck's is a leading procurement tendering agency. We post all our bids on Merck's, and we do get a number of suppliers that usually reply to those requests for quotations. So we're very satisfied with this. It does have to meet specific criteria for an electronic parking device, and there was competition here, and the company that we are recommending met all those requirements at the lowest cost.
So with the new device, would be more efficient? Is that the reason?
The devices basically are now for new equipment that we're purchasing, new electronic parking devices, so they definitely have to meet that. Plus, there's municipal law enforcement officers as well as police officers who don't have those devices because they don't write that many tickets, so we have to have a manual stock in order for them to write those tickets as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, colleagues? Mayor Tory?
Just one more question. I mean, are there people, I saw, like, I was heartened by the fact there was a competitive tender. I actually had written down in my book on a little yellow slip, it doesn't say in these reports, and it would be useful if it did, whether the person who won is the incumbent. It's always just interesting to know. It doesn't mean anything necessarily, but
certainly we can put that in future reports. I don't know for sure. I can certainly find out before the meeting's over.
But it's not that urgent, but it gives you an indication whether you're getting the same people over and over again, having genuine competition. But then, just to Mr. Langenfeld's point, I mean, are there 4 other people out there who produce to this kind? I mean, to me, it strikes me it's not a order that everybody would do, but it's a special kind of paper with the printing and so forth. Is that a customary thing? How did we get to 2 bidders? Is what my question is.
We got 2 bids based on what we advertised. Whether there's other manufacturers out there that could meet those requirements, you would think that.
They just didn't answer the call.
Yeah, they didn't answer the call.
Okay.
If there are no other questions or comments, colleagues, a motion to receive the deputation and to approve the report. Councillor Hart, seconded. Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Item number 17, I think Mayor Tory, was that you that wanted to, or was Councillor Hart one of you wanted to hold? No, this is the 2019 patrol vehicle purchases.
Oh, yes, I had one question. I've been out talking to a lot of police officers, I think as the chief knows, just, around visiting divisions and going out on bikes and on foot and so forth, and I've had a fair number of them, especially the ones that are slightly larger in size, say to me, here's how they say it, because it's a very balanced view, but they say, once you get inside the car, it's actually quite comfortable, but the getting in and out of the car is not that comfortable, and I noticed that was kind of made, there was some reference made to that here, because we have to switch cars. And then one of the things I noticed in the report was that it also talked about, I think the Ford Explorer is kind of a small SUV, correct? I think it is, medium, like it's not a car, and I just noticed when I sort of am in York region or otherwise that they have more of these SUVs, and I presume we've looked at that and for one reason or another rejected that. But some of the officers have just shared with me the thought that this car is, once you get all the gear in it, the computers and all the rest, that it isn't exactly a comfortable place to spend a lot of your time. Not that we want them to be in the cars all the time, but do you follow my question? Just wanted to get a comment.
Yes, and in fact, that was one of the criteria that we
said
used.
That here.
So there was we actually had an ergonomic assessment done. And you're right, the officers are getting bigger and we're putting more equipment in the cars. So this satisfies that need as well as other criteria that we expect in terms of fuel efficiency, having an all-wheel drive vehicle so we can avoid buying snow tires and snowing. In terms of our assessment, then this provided the best overall value. We're still going to be looking next year for perhaps another manufacturer is going to make an SUV that might be better and meet cheaper and meet our needs. And if that's the case, then we'll go with them.
I'm sure you do this because I noticed like York Region, for example, has only SUVs. I have no idea why. I mean, that's up to them to make their own decision. They may have a different list than us, but hopefully we could look at those kinds of things and, not reinvent the wheel. But again, we have our own needs here, and we have small streets and so forth and so on. But I just am mindful of this. I don't want to call it a complaint. This observation that was made to me by the officers, and more than one, quite a few. So that's why I thought to ask about it today. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Mayor Tory, would you make a motion to approve the report? Seconded, Ms. Santa Casera. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. That takes us, Councillor Hart, to item 19, which is the 2018 operating budget variance for the service. You wanted to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. On page 3 of the variance report, you talk about the 50 positions, communication positions for 911. I'm just wondering if the intention is to report out on metrics after all those positions have been filled in terms of response time, the effect that hiring those 50 individuals in 911 and the response time, I would assume, being much better after all those positions have been filled. Will you be reporting out to the board on that?
Yeah, I have no problems reporting on what the difference or what the positive impact will be of adding those 50, bearing in mind there was extensive research that was done under the leadership of Deputy Coxon to give us a clear understanding of what were the issues and concerns and how best to tackle those issues. So I would be comfortable in definitely providing results so that the board sees exactly the benefits of what we're asking for.
That's great. Thanks, Chief. And just another question on page 4. The total premium pay is running at about $11.1 million over. A chunk of that is because of the reduced staffing levels with the number of officers that have left, but you're in the process of filling a couple of hundred officer positions. If you had those couple of hundred officer positions, what would the impact have been on total premium pay? I assume we wouldn't be overspent this year if those positions were filled already. Would that be a fair comment?
Premium pay is not just in terms of number of officers. There's events that occur that sometimes even with as many officers you have, you still have to dedicate resources because it requires callbacks or other resources to attend to that event very quickly. And we had probably 4 instances in 2018 so far where that actually transpired. But certainly, yeah, if we get more, especially on the civilian side, if we were able to fill our positions on the civilian side, certainly I think we could reduce our premium pay expenditures because we are required now, or we have to actually incur callbacks in order to actually satisfy some of those service requirements that we have. But you're right, I mean, it's something that you would expect would happen.
Thank you. That's it for me, Chair. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mayor Tory?
Just I want to go back on the overtime and premium pay. The overtime that has been implemented for purposes of trying to reduce the violence in the city for the 2-month period. When we come up with this net figure of, or this figure of 9.7 million, does that include that amount?
So, Mayor Tory, that's what you're referring to as the city is with regards to the summer safety, or?
Yes, there's the 2.7. I thought it was actually even more than that, but anyway, there's the overtime amount for the extra time that people are being asked to put in the summer, all the officers.
Right, that's
the chief initiated 4 or 5 weeks ago.
That does not include. This does not include that.
So if you have to include that, because I mean it's a budget, it's going to be in your budget regardless of how it gets paid for. So really, in reality, then that has to be an amount. What is the amount? 2.7 million?
2.7 plus, yeah. So it'd be 2.7 more.
So it has to be added to the
Yes.
to the anticipated shortfall, which I think is at, what is it, 1.6 net or something?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
that's correct.
Okay. Well, why wouldn't it have been added? Because
We
it's coming
did
out of
the-
your budget. I mean, whoever ends up paying for it, same people pay. Let's kind of put it that way.
Absolutely. We did this was as of June 30th, so we wanted to note it as a point. It will probably be in our next variance report. The arrangement that we have with the city is that we will monitor the situation, and then at year end, if monies are required to meet that requirement, the 2.7, at that point they'll take the money that they've hopefully parked for this and be able to address it. But we're going to monitor that because we still have a $1.6 million deficit that we have to deal with, and we're really looking at all expenditures, both on the hiring side as well as on the equipment and material side, to make sure that we can come in on budget at year end.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, colleagues? If not, may I have a motion to approve item 19, Councillor Hart? So moved, seconded. Ms. Sandicusera? All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Takes us to 21, where there's a deputation. 21, where there's a deputation on the 2018 budget variance for the service, the period June 30th, and the deputation is from Derek Moran first.
You just told Miguel that you know the rules in regards to when he asked a question, and I'm a little fuzzy because I've looked over the rules of the board before, and I don't think I've ever seen the rule of this board that says we can't come here and ask questions. Can you get Carlene to point out to me what number is that rule?
course, is that you make a deputation. We hear what you have to say, that it can include questions, but it doesn't mean that we're going to give you an answer. It means we will sit down and take it into consideration in our discussions. Same as the city is.
Okay, but I just heard Mayor Tory
and no questions
about how you all serve the public and that we pay the bills, and Premier Ford says that we're the boss, and to remember how you people all work for the boss and that we're the boss. Now Councillor Nunziata just made a claim that we can't ask questions. Where does it say that? You're the servants. You said you know the rules, Miguel. I want the rule pointed out to me where it says we can't ask questions.
We take those questions into, it's not a dialogue back and forth, we take those questions into consideration.
Okay, but that's what Chris, okay, but you're talking about what Chris did, looking directly to the chief and asking questions. Miguel asked a question of you. I think it was a rather simple question. I mean, at the Toronto Parking Authority committee that when then city manager Peter Wallace took over, you're not going to believe this. Councillor Nunziata's not going to believe this. Miguel asked a simple question to Peter Wallace, and Peter Wallace answered simply. You know why? Because he recognized he was a public servant. Where's the rule of the board that says we can't ask questions?
Committee, Derek, listen, you're here because you want to make a deputation and make some comments on the 2018 capital budget variance report for the Toronto Police Service. Would you please do so? You've got 2.5 minutes left.
Miguel was told you know the rules.
Derek?
Where is the rule in the board's bylaws that says the public can't ask questions? I just want to make sure you weren't making stuff up, Chairman.
Derek, do you want to make a deputation on the 2018?
I demand to know the rule that says that you just alluded to, that we can't ask questions. You know the rules, Miguel. No, actually, I don't know the rule that says we. I just want to, you took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Section 1 of the Constitution talks about prescribed by law, which stops government from doing this arbitrary action sort of stuff. So is it prescribed by law, by this board, yes or no, that it says in the rules that people that come to speak here, not a person, mind you, because if you pass that bylaw, you know it'll apply to a person, that people can't ask questions when they come here.
Derek, let me clarify that. You can ask a question, but it's not a dialogue. I'm not required to answer you. We take what you say.
But you're a trustee of mine. Mayor Tory just said the other day that everybody here takes the duty they have to the people of Toronto very seriously. One of those duties, I mean, I'll bring it next month, Donovan Waters has said is the utmost duty of loyalty. What falls underneath utmost duty of loyalty is to provide information. I mean, you all make Premier Doug Ford, quite frankly, look like a liar when he goes around saying that the people are the boss. I don't think he's lying. I think he gets it, and you all don't want to get it.
Do you want to make a deputation on the topic or not?
You just said I can ask you a question. Is it in the rules of the board that we can ask questions? Yes or no?
We'll look for the specific rule, but generally speaking, the chair can govern the meeting and can keep it in order. That means that he's given some discretion to ensure that the meeting flows properly. You have now spent the last 4 minutes not talking about the item, and the chair has asked you to stick to the item that you're deputing on, which is an example.
You're a trustee of mine, and I'm the sole living beneficiary. Any objections to that?
You asked a
question. You are a public servant of mine. You're telling me what I can and can't talk about?
No, that is not what I
did. You don't understand Section 2B of the Constitution either, do you?
Sir, there's an item on the agenda. The chair has asked you to speak and depute on the thing that you signed up to speak and depute to. That's one example of him trying to keep the meeting in order, just as it was when there were questions of the chief, which is not appropriate in the context of the meeting being the board's meeting.
I'm not talking about what Chris said.
I understand. I told you we'll get back to you on that. But the question now that the chair has asked you is whether you're going to speak to the item you signed up for.
Derek, will you speak to the item? Because you did sign up several days ago to speak to the item on the budget variance.
I'm not here to answer your questions. You're the servants. You're here to answer ours. So if they can't find, let's be clear, for the public record, there's no rule that says we can't ask questions when we come here.
So I will commit to coming back to you on that, but I've given you my answer. What I would like now is if you would get on with your deputation, and if you don't have one on this,
Do I have any time
thank
left?
you. I will give you 4 minutes, because I started a second ago.
You're a swell guy. Look at that. So in this report, it says, by implementing an administrative penalty system for parking bylaw violations, the City of Toronto, as well as the Province of Ontario, will ensure that parking bylaw matters are resolved through a streamlined process administered by the city without the requirement of utilizing a court process under the Provincial Offences Act. Now, just mentioned about Mayor Tory talking at City Hall on Monday. One of the quotes he made was, "And while we as a municipality must always acknowledge that we exist and operate within the context of a Canadian Constitution," which is odd to me because the word municipal actually isn't even mentioned once in the Constitution Act 1982. I just want to remind all of you that one part of the Constitution is Section 11D. Any person charged with an offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law in a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal. Just want to point out that Queen Victoria actually repealed the enacting clause of the British North America Act 1867 with the Statute Law Revision Act of 1893. So this is a bylaw from the city, this is their own bylaw from the City of Toronto, 799. Neither a screening officer nor a hearing officer has jurisdiction to consider questions relating to the validity of a statute, regulation, or bylaw, or the constitutional applicability or operability of any statute, regulation, or bylaw, which is interesting because this is what the Supreme Court of Canada said in R versus Conway 2010. This truism is reflected in the court's recognition that the principles governing remedial jurisdiction under the Charter apply to both courts and administrative tribunals. It is also reflected in the jurisprudence flowing from Mills and Cuddy-Chick's trilogy, according to which, with rare exceptions, administrative tribunals with the authority to apply the law have the jurisdiction to apply the Charter to the issues that arise in the proper exercise of their statutory functions. I'm just going to read back again their own bylaw at the City of Toronto. Neither a screening officer nor a hearing officer has jurisdiction to consider questions relating to the validity of a statute, regulation, or bylaw, or the constitutional applicability or operability of any statute, regulation, or bylaw. So that's the complete opposite of what the Supreme Court of Canada said, that they do have the jurisdiction. Do you understand why I have so much contempt for the City of Toronto, Chair Pringle? They're just making stuff up. They think that they can just pass a bylaw which gives them permission not to apply the Constitution when people go to these rigged kangaroo courts, obviously. Because as Mayor Tory, and I just want him to remember these words, we as a municipality must always acknowledge that we exist and operate within the context of a Canadian Constitution, but not if we pass a bylaw that we just determine on our own that we don't feel like abiding by it. Isn't that great? Is that my 4 minutes?
Yes, thank you, Derek.
Right.
I don't think you quite got to the budget variance, but thank you.
No, the administrative penalty system is mentioned in this.
Okay. Any questions of Derek, colleagues? Okay. Thanks,
Do you still
Derek.
love me, Chair Pringle?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Chris Langenfeld, you're the next.
So I mentioned last time that we discussed body-worn cameras, that it would be coming up in a future capital budget, and lo and behold, here it is. So again, we're back to this issue of the $85 million, which is again mentioned in this report as being the assumed decade-long price tag for body-worn cameras. And I note that in the report it actually refers to that being a previous figure. We haven't got any new figures yet. Meanwhile, the board previously approved $500,000 back in, what was that, March 2016, I think it was, that you approved the $500,000, and so far $23,000 of that has been spent, but that $500,000 was supposed to be so that the service could provide some figures to the board as to what they thought this was going to cost, given the new realities of cloud data storage, how that was going to affect this concocted number of $85 million. And I'll point out again, that works out to in excess of $18,000 per unit for body-worn cameras, but of course the one I was wearing when I was here 2 months ago was just over $200. So that leaves quite a discrepancy there as to how we're getting up to this almost 90 times the price for the service to do it. And again, maybe that reflects to the way we're quoting these deals and not going out and actually looking for what we can do. You know, there's been a lot of situations where the service and or the board have gone to the public to get some help from people to help you in areas where you're not able to come up with better ideas. Maybe this is somewhere else where the board needs to, rather than appointing the service to come back at some point in another couple decades with an idea of what they think they want to do on this, maybe it's time to start looking to the public to start explaining to you how to make this happen so that we can start having a impartial third-party record of what's going on with policing. We can deal with the problems and we can have some support there so that when officers are unjustly accused of having done something wrong, there's an accurate record of what happened, and when it is an issue of a problem with officers, that we can actually deal with those officers and get rid of the ongoing problems, because obviously it's that translates into our biggest issue here in policing is the community buy-in and dealing with policing and having trust with police and reporting information. And you can look at all the issues we deal with, and whether it's the $25 million that we're that the province and now the city's going to pony up an equal amount to deal with violence in this city, that all boils down to if you had better trust from the community where they were more willing to help the police and assist them in issues, we wouldn't be having to spend $50 million on more officers, at least in some cases. We'd be able to actually deal with the issues because we'd have more community buy-in. And I would suggest that it'd be much more appropriate to earmark part of that $50 million towards putting in body-worn cameras. And again, I'd suggest that since it's been now since February 2015 that the service started its pilot project with body-worn cameras, we still haven't gotten anywhere. We still don't have any answers. It certainly seems to be time for this board to look at maybe having somebody else take a look at it and see if we can't come up with a little bit more efficient set of answers on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions, colleagues, for Chris? Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the item number 21, which is the 2018 capital budget variance? If not, a motion to approve? Sorry, receive? Receive the deputation and approve the report. Ms. Sandra Casera, Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried, thank you. That takes us to item number 26. Councillor Hart, you wanted to hold that? Yeah, that is the quarterly report, occupational health and safety.
Yeah, just a very quick question for the chief. On page 3 of the report, anytime I see these charts, I always look at where there's an anomaly. And I guess under overexertion, it looks like that number has gone up substantially. And when I look down below in the explanation, it talks about the number of suspects resisting arrest or foot pursuits. So would I read into that that the number of resisting arrest and foot pursuits as a whole has gone up, therefore a connection to overexertion going up?
That's correct. Okay,
thanks.
With that, colleagues, any other questions? If not, Councillor Hart, a motion to approve? Sorry, to receive. Councillor Hart, seconded. Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Takes us to 27, and that's the update quarterly report on the Transformation Task Force, the way forward. There's one deputation, and that is Chris Langenfeld.
I probably could have saved a lot of time by just waiting here. I noticed the scorecards don't seem to be in here, and the point I was actually going to refer to, I picked up from the scorecards. I believe the technology side of things is all red. across the board in terms of implementing the technology or developing the technology to deal with the new plan here for dealing with officers. And the scorecards don't really give a lot of information as to where the service sees itself proceeding with that, what the long-term implications here are overall to the rest of the way forward, whether you know, obviously we had a group of technology-minded people here, 2 groups earlier today. Perhaps the way to solve this problem is to deal with them on developing some of these technology solutions. But I'm just looking for a little more public information on how the service is addressing this being read and stopped across the board, basically, on moving forward with the whole technological side of its new policing initiatives, which of course seems to be a really major part of the whole plan. So I'm wondering how that's going to affect this whole plan moving forward. So I'll ask the board to ask the chief.
Chris. Any questions for Chris? Okay. Charlene, or is anybody here from the task force that wants to? Thanks, Charlene.
Sorry, I apologize. I think I didn't catch all of the question about the connected officer, it being read. Mm-hmm. Is that the questions mainly?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So I think internally we're just having some technical challenges that we didn't anticipate. That's affecting, we're saying, the stakeholder impact. So users are really excited about the devices, just want it to have all the features and functionality so it can work optimally. And so we're having some technical challenges, partly with third-party vendors and trying to work through some of the privacy issues and some of the technical challenges around that. The other piece of it is around budgeting. So we've got funding short-term for a small group of users, but the other reason you see red is because there's no long-term funding that's been secured for wide-scale expansion of the devices. Okay.
Thanks, Sean. Colleagues, any other questions or comments on this report? Jim?
Just a couple of quick questions, just to follow up to that comment. So, are the issues predominantly vendor issues, or are they
sorry, Charlene, we've got a question here for you. You're not finished yet. Where's Greg when you need him?
Sorry about that. I'll repeat that for you. Are these issues predominantly vendor issues, or are they more our issues trying to modify the application for our use?
I think it's a combination of both. I think we're charting new territory in some areas, and so we're trying to work through things with some of these third-party vendors, as well as internally trying to work through some issues.
Okay, thank you. We just got one question for the chief. On page 6, it talks about senior officers. 76% of senior officers have set performance goals thus far this year. Will 100% of senior officers have performance goals set up for 2019 before 2019 starts?
I think that's Deputy McLean.
Oh, she's just outside.
I may be able to answer that only because I'm involved in the process. She's
Yeah, you got the microphone. You have to go to the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can repeat the question. Would you like me to repeat the question? Yes. On page 6 of the report, it says 76% of senior officers have set performance goals thus far. Mm-hmm. So my question is, would it be reasonable to expect that 100% of senior officers will have performance goals for 2019 before 2019 commences, for the year 2019?
Yeah, for 2019. So we are reporting thus far. So this was our first year as implementing this new performance system, starting with goals. So the vision for this is goals. Started out with the senior leaders, have it brought down to lower level leaders, then to bring in our competencies, because it's one thing to say, here's the goals, but the other piece, if we're going to be a modern organization, is how are we achieving those goals? So there is a multi-year plan to this, and part of that is also embedding, not just goal setting that are matched to our 3 transformational goals, but to our competencies and to other organizational priorities. So right now there is, as we mentioned, the percentage, 76%. Our goal is actually 100%.
Would that be for 2019?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions, colleagues? Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you.
With that, motion to receive the deputation and to receive the update report. Councillor Hart, seconded. Mr. Jeffers, all in favor? Any contrary? That takes us to item number 28, which is the TTC Special Constables, Derek Moran, deputation. It's 29 it is, I'm sorry.
Hello, Chair Pringle, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm better for seeing you again, Derek. You've got 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
So in this report, it mentions Presto audit initiative beginning in March 2017. Fair inspectors have been tasked with auditing Presto device functionality during the course of their regular duties. Fair inspectors perform test taps on Presto devices on buses, in stations, and on both legacy and low-floor streetcars. You know how you say about, how I say about, in law, all definitions are dangerous. There's actually no legal definition for Presto in Black's Law Dictionary, the Dictionary of Canadian Law. So I looked up Canadian Oxford Dictionary, 2nd edition. Presto is defined as used to announce the successful completion of a magical trick. Magical is defined as of or relating to magic. And magic is defined as the art of producing by sleight of hand optical illusion, witchcraft. So one might be wondering, what is the sleight of hand being used here? Well, didn't Mayor Tory say soon after he became mayor that kids up to 12 get to use the TTC for free? Or as I think it was Councillor Campbell who put it, there are now a lot of 12-year-olds with beards using the TTC for free now. And why is that? Supreme Court of Canada, again, Law Society of British Columbia versus Trinity Western University, 2018 said, for example, an acceptable legal incarnation of the abstract notion equality is a principle of the rule of law that all are equal before and under the law, such that all have a claim to equal protection and to equal application of the law. Didn't Mayor Tory just the other day at their Premier Doug Ford wine and cheese party at City Hall, as Councillor Mamaliti put it, didn't Mayor Tory actually say during his opening remarks, and I just repeated this earlier, and while we as a municipality must always acknowledge that we exist and operate within the context of a Canadian Constitution, it is our duty to represent the people of Toronto. Well, that Constitution in Section 1, I just spoke about it the previous item. Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And the Dictionary of Canadian Law has a definition for free. First two have to do with statutes that are not relevant here. 3, without impediment. 5, without limitation. But number 4 says, without cost. And Cameron versus Church of Christ Scientists goes over, oh, I should point out, I pointed out to Mayor Tory a while ago, Donovan Waters here in his Law of Trust in Canada text points out on page 718, Canadian municipalities might well succeed in attaining charity status under Goodman versus Saltash Corporation. The City of Toronto may very well be a charity. Isn't that wonderful? So Sir Samuel Romilly, in argument in Maurice versus Bishop of Durham, 1805, said, there are 4 objects within one of which all charity is to be administered in this court must fall. 1, first, relief of the indigent, that means poor, in various ways, money, provisions, education, medical assistance, etc. Secondly, the advancement of learning, like libraries. Councillor Hart's on the library board. 1 minute. Third, the advancement of religion. Not quite sure how that managed to get in there. And number 4, which is the most difficult, the advancement of objects of general public utility. Have you ever seen section 72.1 of the City of Toronto Act, Chair Pringle? In this section, public utility, and remember, it falls under one of the heads of charity, includes a street lighting system and a transportation system. That means we're all supposed to be using the TTC for free. Because in 1 Corinthians 16:14, you know, the first line of the Constitution recognizes the supremacy of God. Let all your things be done with charity. And I know how much charity means to you, Chair Pringle, because everyone knows that you're also the chairman of a charitable foundation. God bless you, Chair Pringle. So if I get arrested for trying to use the TTC for free, now Section 26 of the Constitution, I claim the right and/or freedom to use the TTC for free and use the security the person everyone has the right to and the right not to be deprived of. Mentioned Section 7 towards the cost of discharging the cost of using the TTC for free.
I don't believe it. You actually did that in exactly 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Any questions, colleagues, for Derek? Thank you.
You're more than welcome, Chair.
Okay. Colleagues, any discussion on this issue? If not, may I have a motion to receive the deputation and the report? Councillor Hart, seconded Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? Any contrary? I think that cleans up everything. Is there any other business that anybody wishes to bring before the board? If not, a motion to adjourn. Mr. Jeffers, seconded Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you very much. It's 9 minutes past 4.